these people.
A recurring theme, of course, on How Do We Miss That, and will be also on this show, is fuck Israel. Because we say that every week, and unfortunately, they continue to violate their own ceasefire. They are murdering Palestinians daily still. They are stealing the land in Gaza. The last we had talked about 2 weeks ago, the Yellow Line had taken over more than 50% of the territory from Gaza and cut that territory off completely and would murder any Palestinian that entered into that area. So they're not free by any stretch of the imagination, and they're not stopping the ceasefire. More than 100 Palestinians have been killed since the quote-unquote ceasefire. So we're going to cover some of the stuff that Israel's been up to and some of their war crimes this week, because we do that every week. We're going to continue to. Gaza officials warn that thousands remain trapped under the rubble and say that aid flow is critically insufficient. And we covered this 2 weeks ago, and it continues that Israel is still continuing to not allow enough aid in, though they will scream that they are allowing all the trucks that are there. We know that's not true. We've seen the trucks lined up. Right? Only 4,400 aid trucks have been allowed into Gaza out of the 15,600 that were supposed to have entered. Now, the thing is that neither side signed this ceasefire agreement, so I don't know whose ceasefire agreement they're supposed to be following, because neither side technically agreed to it. But that is just one collapsed building. Good luck finding people under there without heavy equipment. The bodies of over 10,000 Palestinians remain trapped under the rubble of buildings destroyed by Israel. Okay. In a statement on November 6th, that is the Gaza's National Committee for Missing Persons. It's disgusting that they even have to have one of those, but they do. Quote, the humanitarian situation in Gaza requires urgent intervention to end the suffering of thousands of families waiting to know the fate of their children. Calling for the urgent entry of specialized international rescue teams and heavy equipment to help recover the bodies of trapped and missing Palestinians. The problem is that in order to get there, they have to go through Israeli territory, and Israel, of course, is not going to allow that, because fuck Israel. Israel's continued prevention of crucial equipment from entering Gaza is a clear violation of international humanitarian law, it added, demanding urgent action from the international community to save as many lives as possible and preserve human dignity. Again, not Israel's intent at all. Meanwhile, they continue to block the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza in complete violation of the ceasefire agreement, which went into effect last month. A reminder, Israel did not agree to this ceasefire agreement. It was imposed upon them and Hamas. The Gaza Petroleum and Gas Authority says, we confirm that the Zionist side has been preventing entry of cooking gas trucks for the third consecutive day. From November 3rd to November 5th, not a single gas truck has entered the strip. In previous days, only 2 or 3 trucks were allowed in daily, a situation that warns of a worsening crisis and the emergence of major social and health problems. We also note that the Zionist side has been sending back gas trucks every day without filling them, even after they arrive at the crossing, clear evidence of its deliberate attempt to worsen the suffering of Gaza's residents, despite the ceasefire that was imposed upon them. Furthermore, the Zionist side has adopted a new procedure, instructing trucks to head to the crossing only to turn them back empty as part of its ongoing effort to humiliate and subdue the steadfast Palestinian people in Gaza. So they send an empty truck in there and then turn them back. We all call on concerned parties and monitors of the ceasefire agreement to compel the Israeli side to implement the humanitarian protocol stipulating the entry of fuel and gas, and to intervene urgently to curb this deliberate and worsening gas crisis. Starvation crisis, it ain't just gas. Now, what we said, and we've been calling this for a month, and Israel is basically saying that they're using this as an excuse why they're not not ceasing fire. Well, they haven't actually returned all the hostages, the dead ones. They can't return dead bodies that are buried under rubble and equipment without the heavy equipment to actually dig the bodies out. And of course, Israel knows this. So here's a couple of receipts. We go back to 4 weeks ago. Palestinians cease and Israel fires. Fuck Israel. Fuck Israel.
Yep.
From the mouth of Rafael. So that was the Council of State. And then we've got, what's next? Mondoweiss. Here's another one. The Israeli media is already reporting on a secret clause in the Gaza ceasefire deal that no one is talking about. And what do? They do it in Hebrew. This is like they're communicating amongst themselves, and then they homogenize it for the English, for the Westerners. It's disgraceful.
Right.
So Hebrew language Israeli media reports that there is a secret clause buried in the Gaza ceasefire agreement that would allow Israel to resume the war. You mean the massacre. Again, it's not a war when the other side isn't fighting back. Palestinians worry that this is pretext Netanyahu needs to get out of completing the deal. It's exactly what happened. And it's the same. That was on October 10th. That was written by Mondoweiss. A week later, we covered a very similar thing where they accused Hamas of violating the deal by not returning slain hostages fast enough. Also, what we predicted and what Mondoweiss predicted last week, which was how Israel was going to claim that Hamas was the violator of the ceasefire, which was that the 24 slain hostages still left behind, they haven't been able to deliver them quickly enough because they're buried under rubble. Okay, the scenario Israel had long prepared for has come to pass. Hamas violated the agreement from the very start, announcing the return of only 4 deceased hostages out of the 28 it holds in the Gaza Strip. So this is the justification and the excuse that they're using for continuing to attack and murder Palestinians. Only 28%, though, of the required number of aid trucks have entered the Gaza Strip since the U.S. peace plan was announced, right? According to Gaza's government media office. The office, and again, this is from the Cradle. By the way, I'm not a big fan of the Cradle. I don't even know why, but I know that a lot of people have criticized them. Once in a while, they'll put out an article like this. I really haven't seen this anywhere else, which is why I went to the Cradle. Again, the Gaza office said in a statement on Thursday that Israel is carrying out its policy of strangulation. According to the statement, again, only 53 trucks have been allowed into Gaza, which is less than a third of the 15,600 that were supposed to enter as part of the agreement. The media office went on to say that these limited quantities do not meet the minimum needs, and the Strip urgently needs a regular flow of no less than 600 trucks a day, as stipulated in the deal. That also includes tents, medical supplies, and food. On the other hand, the occupation allows the entry of larger quantities of nutritionally worthless goods, such as soft drinks, chocolate, processed meals, and chips, which reached markets at prices more than 15 times their real value due to the occupation's control over supply chains. This confirms the occupation's reliance on policy of engineering starvation, controlling food security, and directly targeting civilian lives. Of course, they're also providing food that doesn't really have nutrients. Like it said, nutritionally worthless, that you give to starving people that you have not allowed aid in for 2 years. What do you think they're going to do? The lack of specialized equipment entering Gaza has made it nearly impossible for authorities to continue the search for the thousands of victims of Israel's genocide who remain trapped under destroyed infrastructure. Israel has not stopped violating the ceasefire agreement. Using alleged Hamas violations as a pretext, Israel has killed up to now over 150 Palestinians since the ceasefire was imposed last month. An Israeli soldier was killed in Rafah on October 28th. Israel responded by killing over 100 people in less than 12 hours. Earlier that month, a soldier was killed in Rafah, prompting violent strikes that killed dozens of civilians and assassinated several top Hamas leaders. Hamas's military wing, the Qassam Brigades, released a statement confirming that it had lost contact with its fighters in Rafah, which was destroyed and occupied by Israeli troops during the massacre, not a war, massacre. And allegedly, they had started to fill in tunnels with cement that they had allegedly known Hamas fighters to be housed in. Around 200 Palestinian resistance fighters remain trapped in underground tunnels in the southernmost city. Attacks against Israeli soldiers in the area may have been carried out by these isolated fighters who are unable to retreat to Hamas-controlled zones. They've got them boxed in. Israel is, quote, close to killing, unquote, the 200 trapped fighters. The devil, Bezalel Smotrich, said earlier this week, after Tel Aviv was said to have rejected granting safe passage to the resistance operatives. So wait, you're not going to let them go safely. Of course, they're not allowed to shoot their way out. So their only option is to die in the tunnel now? According to reports, the U.S. is trying to convince Israel to allow the fighters to hand over their weapons to a third party and surrender in exchange for amnesty, so that Israel can kill them afterwards, I guess? Some of the Hamas militants in the Rafah tunnels are murderers. They cannot be granted amnesty. They can either be killed or surrender and be detained by the IDF, an Israeli official, a murdering war criminal, told Axios. A U.S. official, also a war criminal, told the outlet that Israel needs to grow up and not allow a tactical issue such as this to undermine the Gaza agreement. Again, that Israel never agreed to. Don't forget, they're allowed to violate all of this because they can claim they never signed off on it in the first place. So, fuck Israel. But remember that they're not just attacking Palestinians, they're attacking the sovereign nation of Lebanon. Under the guise of, well, they funded Hamas, so we can attack them because Hezbollah, even though they've taken out all of Hezbollah's leadership, and they've occupied half of southern fucking Lebanon with permanent troops, nobody says a fucking word. Nobody in the international community has a word to say. Jason Ditz over at Anti-War. Israel massively escalates strikes on Lebanon as Hezbollah threatens retaliation. The new Hezbollah, because again, their leadership was taken out by Israel. So let's look at this. Israel's long-threatened escalation of their attacks on Lebanon seems to have begun in earnest on Thursday, with massive numbers of strikes reported against several towns and villages in the country's south. Did they attack Israel? Remind me. Because that would mean that Israel is attacking a sovereign country unprovoked. Again. And yet not being held to account. The IDF issued evacuation warnings. How kind of them. For at least 5 sites in southern Lebanon, and is claiming, as they so often do, that everything they're attacking is Hezbollah infrastructure. Early indications are that a substantial number of civilian casualties have occurred. What a surprise. The Gazification of Lebanon. The most recent toll has 1 confirmed killed and 9 wounded, though those tolls are expected to rise. This comes amid an Israeli security cabinet meeting at which the Northern Command will reportedly present various options for the direction and scale of a military escalation in Lebanon, in spite of a ceasefire nominally having been in place for the past year. Right? And there's one of the photos from the airstrike on Tair Deba, according to Reuters Connect. Israel has violated the ceasefire thousands of times since then, killing hundreds of people, including over 100 confirmed to be civilians. Hezbollah, again, has not attacked Israel has not fired a single rocket during that period, though that may be about to change. Hezbollah issued a report early on the latest attacks, stating their position that they retain a legitimate right to self-defense. Because when a people are occupied, remember, thank you, Colin Radish Cutter, resistance is justified. They didn't affirm that they would strike back after these latest Israeli attacks, just that they have the right to. The Lebanese government has been seeking talks with Israel to try to calm tensions, though Israel has rejected the idea. Have you ever heard of appeasing a bully working? Ever? No, you kick the bully in the fucking nuts. That's one thing they and Hezbollah seem to agree on, as Hezbollah said they don't believe direct talks with Israel are in the national interest. Well, that's good. Israel has yet to announce its plans beyond further attacking Lebanon, Greater Israel Project, though recently they've suggested no place in the country would be immune to strikes because they think they own all of it. 3,000 years, right? Fucking disgusting pigs. Israeli officials, disgusting war criminals, are also being quoted as saying that the current attacks are being carried out in coordination with the United States, which again further makes everyone who signs off on this and sends weapons to Israel complicit war criminals who should be prosecuted. U.S. officials, of course, have yet to comment on this, but it's largely in keeping with U.S. envoy Tom Barrack's position, which is that Lebanon is a failed state and that the U.S. would support their ally, Israel, in the event of a new war. Don't you need to be attacked to have a war? Again, you're attacking a neighbor that did not attack you. Fuck Israel. But let's continue, because I've got more fuck Israel. This one's unbelievable. Again, a site I'm not really thrilled with, Middle East Monitor. Israel-Palestine news likes to cite them occasionally. This one's unbelievable. Ex-Mossad chief behind the ICJ blackmail campaign brags that Israel has installed a global sabotage network. What?
He is a sick puppy.
Yes. All right. This guy, Yossi Cohen, former director of the Mossad. In a shocking admission, former Mossad director Yossi Cohen has openly boasted that Israel has deployed a global sabotage and espionage network which uses booby-trapped and spy-manipulated equipment, like the pagers, that the terrorist attack that was carried out in Lebanon. The method, denounced as terrorism by ex-CIA chief Leon Panetta, not one of our friends at all, an absolute fucking monster himself, was used to target Hezbollah, and now, according to Cohen, is embedded in all the countries you can imagine, including ours. In a video that's now circulating on social media, Cohen is seen speaking on the Brink podcast hosted by Jake Wallace-Simons, editor of the Jewish Chronicle. The former Mossad director, who led a blackmail campaign against ICJ judges, admits that, detailed the covert program that Israel has planted across the globe. He claimed personal credit for inventing the pager method during his tenure at Mossad's Special Operations Division between 2002 and 2004. So he also should be in prison. Thanks for admitting that. You know how many treated equipment we have in these countries? Not only booby-trapped, but spy-manipulated? In all countries, you can imagine. Germany, too, by the way. We know that they spied on Merkel, that they're spying on Scholz, that they're spying on the current chancellor as well. Okay? Cohen told Simons, describing what appears to be a far-reaching system of compromised commercial hardware used to gather intelligence or, in some cases, cause physical harm. It's not just hardware. It's Toku. It's the spyware, most importantly. It's the spyware that they install, the zero-day attacks that don't even require a keystroke in order to embed themselves on your machine. The technique, he said, originated with the weaponization of communications equipment used by Hezbollah fighters, specifically pagers rigged to function as remote surveillance tools or explosive devices. IEDs. Quote, if adversaries are purchasing equipment, Israel should intervene by embedding itself into their supply chain and exploiting it, he explained, adding that the concept was refined and scaled globally after being tested during the 2006 Second Lebanon Massacre. Not war, but massacre. The former intelligence chief further admitted that Israel's sabotage apparatus had not been fully applied to Gaza, calling this a critical shortfall in the lead up to the Hamas-led offensive on October 7th. Not Gaza, not enough, he said, arguing that Mossad had repeatedly warned of this vulnerability, only to be ignored by Shin Bet and the IDF, who, remember, they pulled their soldiers off the detail that morning. They allowed it to happen. We've shown that multiple times, and that was from the IDF's own admission. While Cohen's remarks appear to confirm long-standing suspicions by government and cybersecurity analysts that Israeli firms and agencies have used tech as a Trojan horse, the interview also raises troubling questions about accountability, legality, and the potential scale of the operations. I would hope so. Critics have long warned that Israeli surveillance and weapons technology, which is often marketed through private firms with close ties to Mossad and Unit 8200, we talked about Apple and Unit 8200 recently, poses a threat to international security. And just how many former Unit 8200 people work at Apple now? You think that that's not what he's talking about? That every iPhone now can be hacked? Cohen's boast now appears to offer direct confrontation that such concerns are confirmation that such concerns are well-founded. Again, last month, Netanyahu himself, in front of that 250 congresspeople, claimed that anyone with a cell phone owns a piece of Israel. That's what he meant. His remarks were widely viewed as an admission about Israel's global sabotage and spy network. They were also a warning to everyone. Don't fuck with us, because if you've got a phone in your pocket, we can make it explode. That was the warning. Fuck Israel for that too. But I ain't done. I got another one from Left Voice, Indie Media Award honoree, class of 2022, top outlet. This is an important one because this also involves another Indie Media Award honoree, Robert Inlakesh. YouTube has removed over 700 videos documenting Israeli war crimes. What a shock. Removed content included harrowing testimonies and key investigations into war crimes committed by the genocidal state. This censorship is a direct consequence of U.S. State Department policy. Thanks, Marco Rubio, you fucking piece of shit narco. YouTube has closed the accounts of 3 of the main Palestinian human rights organizations and removed more than 700 videos of Israeli atrocities and war crimes committed in Gaza and the West Bank. The deleted content from Al-Haq, the Al-Mizan Center, and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights included, among other things, harrowing testimonies from mothers who survived the genocide, investigations into the murder of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, and visual evidence of the systematic destruction of Palestinian homes under occupation, material that constitutes key evidence of war crimes. It's a war crime to delete the war crime exposure, by the way. Now YouTube and Google are complicit. The company, which is now owned by Google, it's actually owned by Alphabet, acknowledged that this decision was a consequence of the sanctions imposed by the U.S. State Department on organizations that cooperated with the ICC in cases against Israeli officials. This is insane. The sanctions and censorship intensified after the ICC issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, prompting an open campaign by the U.S. government to protect Israel and block any accountability. It was also revealed that YouTube coordinated with Israeli tech workers to systematically remove all content critical of Israel. Thankfully, they haven't gotten to our shows yet. The affected organizations and human rights leaders denounced the incident as a blow to freedom of expression and the fight for justice. That's a minimum. Why you're using YouTube as your main source for hosting that evidence is beyond me. But a spokesperson for the Palestinian human rights organization Al-Haq told the CIA-run Intercept, quote, YouTube's removal of a human rights organization's platform carried out without prior warning, they never warn you, represents a serious failure of principle and an alarming setback for human rights and freedom of expression. The U.S. sanctions are being used to cripple accountability work on Palestine and silence Palestinian voices and victims, quote unquote. Yes, because Zionists run YouTube. Naturally. Meanwhile, on other online platforms like MailChimp, they followed suit too, closing key accounts that reported on Palestinian issues. These episodes of cooperation and capitulation are not isolated, however. They're part of a strategy of active complicity between big tech, Google, Meta, Amazon, and imperialist powers, which not only censor the truth, but also provide the infrastructure and technology to sustain the Israeli machinery of occupation and extermination. Notice that they didn't mention Microsoft there, which is interesting, because Microsoft just announced that they would be cutting back some of their work with the Israeli government. But I guarantee you it ain't going to be much. This is all yet another example of how imperialist capitalism puts its economic and political interests above the truth and above the lives of oppressed peoples. The struggle for Palestine is also the struggle to break the information blockade and censorship that legitimizes the genocide. This article was published in Spanish on La Izquierda Diario on Friday, November 7th, translated and adapted for Left Voice by the great James Dennis Hoff. Thank you very much, James. Thank you, Left Voice. Robert Inlakesh also said that he's had video evidence of his that he's posted removed as well. So fuck Israel. All right. And then I've got a little every time, right? Let's keep in mind and let's remember that continue without supporting us. Screw you guys at the New York Post. Fuck Rupert Murdoch. But this is another one of those situations where I have to bring a corporate media thing, somewhat corporate media. You know, the morning after Zohran Mamdani was elected new mayor, outside Yeshiva, Magen David Yeshiva University in Brooklyn, a swastika was spray painted on the wall. And of course, every Zionist in the world screeched, anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, it's got to be the Muslims. Notice, though, that there's a camera literally right fucking there, okay? Well, who guesses what happened, guys? New video shows hateful bike riding vandal who scrawled swastikas on the Magen David Yeshiva, and you'll be shocked to know that he's wearing a fedora, they called it. And I'm not going to play the music because fuck the New York Post. There's the guy on the bike right there. Okay, that fedora looks awfully familiar. It looks a lot like the hats that the Lubavitcher Chabad wear. So, is it possible that they might have done it themselves? Every fucking time we see it, it's always a Zionist trying to drum up sympathy. Every fucking time. All right, I'm going to let the video continue. Here it is. He stops at the thing. He sprays. And he moves on. Didn't even bother to take off his hat. Oh, there's another one. Look at that. In the middle of the night, of course. That's right, Topher. It was either that or it's an Amish dude. Exactly. Here's more official Shomrim Flatbush Safety Patrol showing the man in a fedora. Uh-huh. That looks a lot like the wide-brimmed hats that the Orthodox wear. And it looks like the guy even might have a long black beard. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, those racist Amish. Seriously, Jason. Every time, right? Unbelievable. And then again, not so unbelievable at all. And here he is coming back after he does the vandalism. And he's going home. Maybe he's got a mask on to cover his face. If I were spray painting a swastika as a Zionist, I would probably have a mask on myself. And fuck the New York Post, by the way. All right. Don't subscribe to them. They're garbage. But, and what's funny is they won't even admit that it's likely a Zionist. Disturbing surveillance, right? This is the way they describe it. Captured the mysterious bike-riding vandal who painted swastikas. The footage shows a single figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat pedal up to the school around 6:30 in the morning, stopping briefly and scrawling the hateful graffiti before riding off. Every time. First of all, it's hate graffiti. I don't care if it was on a mailbox or a light pole. We would look into that too. But here you have a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, a Jewish school with a massive attendance. Uh-huh. And that certainly looked like a Muslim that was riding that bike, didn't it? Because you know that's the narrative that they would like to believe, that it was a Palestinian that did that. Pennsylvania is number one in Amish population in the world. That is true. Ohio is number two, descent in bloom. But it's certainly not Flatbush, Brooklyn. But you know where a lot of, you know who lives in Flatbush, Brooklyn? A lot of them? Orthodox Jews that wear wide-brimmed black hats. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Fuck Israel. All right. I need to breathe after that. A lot of riled up. I had missed 2 weeks, so the secret Nazi sect of Zionists. And they're not so secret, though. That's the thing, Fred. They're proud of what they do. They're not trying to hide it anymore. Because there literally has been no repercussions for anything that they have done. So why would they not admit it, other than to, at some point, not be prosecuted? But I don't know when that's going to be. All right. So before we continue, again, I'm going to ask you to, if you're able to, support the media you want to see and support shows like this. The best ways to do that are by Cash App. And thank you to whoever did donate on the Cash App earlier tonight. I did see one come through. Christopher Anthony, thank you. $50. Appreciate that. Kate, Kameshwari Kate, $15. Thank you so much. This is great. $sign Indie News Network on Cash App. co-fi.com/Indie News Network, and that's supposed to pop a thing up. I got to fix that. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. Then we've got IndieNewsNow.com, again, the name of the show, but also the website where we are live and also where you can support the media you want to see. So that if all these platforms like YouTube ever decide to shut us down, guess what? We're still going to be able to go live directly to IndieNewsNow.com. So even if all the other 8 platforms decide to kick us off, which likelihood they wouldn't, but I want to make sure that they can't shut us down no matter what. Then, of course, over at Substack, we're live at Indie Media Today. Greetings to everyone over there. And at INNnewsletter.com, sign up to get the weekly update and other INN podcasts like INN One-on-One and American Tradition with Jesse Jett and INN News, which are all housed over at INNnewsletter.com. We're gonna do this every Tuesday night now at 10 p.m. Eastern. We're just shifting. So for those who weren't here earlier, like Vicky, and it's in the description, but How Do We Miss That is evolving. You know, I took a look around at the landscape and I said, you know, as a show name, it's been around for 4 years. We never really named the show. It kind of evolved into its own name, but I never actively decided that this is what I want to call it. But because we're using articles from Indie News Now, I think it makes a lot of sense to brand Indie News Now and link the website into the show name. So it's called Indie News Now Live. And I've been wanting to do a show kind of by myself, a news show. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to see how this goes. Again, Thursday nights, you're going to see a mix of shows. You're going to see a combination of either INN one-on-one. You're going to see Indie's Tech Tips, which I'm going to do shows of, and we're going to talk about the tools. We're going to do some more Nobody Wants to Work Anymore, and there might even be one on Thursday with me and Himbo. And, of course, American Tradition, which will be the last Thursday of every month. We've kind of tried to set on that as a schedule. So thank you, everybody, again, for supporting this move. Tell everyone about Indie News Now and about Indie News Now Live. I really think that it might help give us a little bit of a boost because we certainly could use one. The algorithm doesn't love us. Votes, by the way, will be moving to 11 p.m. on Sunday nights. So we are still going to do votes. It's going to happen on Sunday night. And the last Sunday of every month will still be in uncensored votes. But the truth is that I can't continue to stay up as late as I've been staying on Sunday nights, especially. And I've got to start working on my schedule. So spreading this out a little bit better seems to make more sense, at least for me. And we're going to try this and see how it goes. And thank you, everybody, for being on board and supporting that. So I will, again, say to support independent media because we need it more than ever. And we will see you next Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m., check out INN News with Reef and Colin. And we'll see you again real soon. Love you all, fam. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to me, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe?
Who are these people?
I also wanted to mention this excellent declassified article that was published yesterday by Martin Williams. Israeli weapons firms set to close their UK wing. This was an investigative article and journalism from Declassified that started to dig into this company, Rafael, and their UK subsidiary, and it found that it basically was an intel front. It was a shadow of a company. It didn't really exist. I could have easily put this in the Fuck Israel segment, but I didn't. But I definitely want people to take a look at this one. All right. Our UK System Limited is registered in London, but records show that it's a subsidiary of Israel's state-owned arms giant, Rafael. How are they allowed to operate in the UK? All right. They donated at least $1,500 to partner with a cross-party group of MPs. How is that legal? Westminster authorities subsequently launched an inquiry into the APPG's chairman, and the group quickly disbanded. Oof. So they tried to co-opt and buy off lawmakers. That didn't happen. Now the firm has launched a so-called First Gazette notice to Companies House, which initiates the process of closing it. Right. They claim that the disclosure is not linked to declassified's investigation, but no official reason has yet been given. All right. That this building was empty for 6 years. This is crazy.
An arms company owned by the Israeli government has just taken its entire website offline after our investigation revealed that it had given money to a group of British politicians.
And now it seems to have disappeared altogether.
The building is empty.
It's empty.
Yeah, for the last 6 years or something like that.
6 years?
Yeah.
The company documents show that they're registered here.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be any sign of them.
It's called RUK Advanced Systems Limited, and officially it's registered in London. The website claims, "We're good people committed to creating positive change." So let's have a look at some of the nice things that these good people do. Well, they sell missiles designed for urban combat, and they sell torpedoes with hard kill capabilities.
These are the official documents from when RUK Advanced Systems Limited was set up in 2022.
They show that although it's registered in London, all the shares in the company are actually held by Rafael, which is a state-owned Israeli arms firm. Rafael was founded in 1948 under an arm of the Israeli Defense Forces, and it's been responsible for making many of the missiles and drones that Israel uses to bomb Gaza. In particular, their infamous spike-guided missiles have been called out for causing huge numbers of civilian casualties. Recently, Rafael even made a promo video that showed its drone system tracking and killing someone in Gaza.
Jesus. All right. So go watch this video. Go support Declassified UK, another Indie Media Award honoree for top outlet, and support independent media in general. If you can and are able to support independent media with a tip of the network, ways to do that: Cash App, $ Indie News Network, co-v.com/Indie News Network. You got paypal.me/Indie News Network. Do that as friends and family. You got the website, IndieNewsNow.com, and that's where we're live right now. You can also check out news. And then the Substacks, IndieMediaToday.com, where we are live right now, and INNNewsletter.com, where you can get a weekly update of all the different shows at INN. See you next Tuesday. So support independent media. Like I said, we need it more than ever. I'll see you next week, and I love you all, fam. Have a good night. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe?
Who are these people?
We're going to get up to our favorite or not so favorite or favorite part of the show, which is fuck Israel, because we have to talk about every week what's going on and what they're doing to the Palestinian people and how they are trampling the world. And they're just, you know, making a joke of laws and corruption laws and all different things. And it's not just Israel, but Israel's supporters and the Israeli lobby that is incredibly powerful in this country. So I'm going to start out with a video of somebody that describes what's going on here, because I think she can do it better than I. And funny enough, this is Earth Hippie at Hippie Goat on Twitter. She says, this is a hard video to watch, forcing herself to watch this because we must know terrible, horrifying testimonies of sexual torture and rape of Palestinians by the Israeli army. So this is graphic. If you get triggered by this, you might want to cut away for the next 3-4 minutes. So, or more.
I was raped 4 times over 2 continuous days by Israeli soldiers. This is what a 42-year-old Palestinian woman arrested from Gaza in November 2024 said in her testimony to the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. During this, she was stripped naked, tied to a bed, brutally raped, beaten, humiliated, and filmed. The soldiers threatened her to post her photos on social media. Recounting what happened, N.A. stated that she cannot describe what she felt. She said, I wished for death every moment. A 35-year-old Palestinian man arrested from Al-Shifa hospital in March 2024. He was raped by a trained dog, while soldiers beat him and sprayed pepper spray in his face. He was stripped and threatened with the rape of his family inside the Sedate Man military camp. He described the aftermath, saying, I suffered a severe physiological breakdown and deep humiliation. I lost control because I could never have imagined experiencing such a thing. TQ, a 41-year-old Palestinian man arrested from Kamal Adwan Hospital in December 2023. He was subjected to extreme sexual torture, including threats to have his wife brought to the detention site to be raped in front of him. He was then violently raped with a wooden stick, and then he was forced to lick the same object. The torment was so severe that he commented, from sheer anguish, I lost consciousness for minutes. M.A., an 18-year-old Palestinian boy, arrested in 2025 near a humanitarian aid distribution point. He was sexually assaulted when soldiers repeatedly raped him with a bottle. This was done to him and other detainees, sometime in groups. He shared the profound impact of this abuse, saying, they violated our dignity and destroyed our spirits and our hope for life. I had wanted to continue my education. Now I am lost after what happened to me. These are only 4 testimonies out of many others gathered recently from Palestinian newly released from Israeli prisons and detention camps by the Palestinian Center for Human Rights that documented systematic sexual torture against Palestinian detainees. These are not isolated incidents, but a deliberate policy of humiliation and violence with the context of the ongoing genocide, the ongoing Israeli genocide against Palestinians in Gaza.
Man, it's hard to watch, I know. And, man, fuck Israel for that. But again, that's just, you can't even, that just begins to scratch the surface. So, the Dissident also wrote an article about this, as well as another one about State Haman, which she mentioned briefly. But that these people were taken from hospital beds. They were already sick or wounded or injured. And then they were like brutally raped. I mean, it's just, wow. But yeah, most moral army in the world, right? So we've got the Dissident, friend of the show, original INN co-founder. Israel committed mass rape against Palestinian detainees. So she talked about this report from the Palestinian Human Rights Council, Center for Human Rights. Okay. Infamously, 5 IDF soldiers were caught on video during the genocide in Gaza, gang raping a Palestinian detainee at State Haven torture facility. Not prison, but torture facility. New victim testimony gathered by lawyers and researchers at the Gaza City-based Palestinian Center for Human Rights revealed that this was in no way an isolated incident. Again, collecting new testimonies from a number of Palestinian detainees from the Gaza Strip who were recently released from Israeli prisons and detention camps. The accounts revealed an organized and systematic practice of sexual torture, including rape, forced stripping, forced filming, sexual assault using objects and dogs, as that woman spoke about. My God, dogs. I can't even imagine. And what human being would imagine doing that to another human being? In addition to, of course, deliberate psychological humiliation aimed at crushing human dignity and erasing individual identity entirely. That also is one of the definitions of genocide, I believe. PCHR affirms that the testimonies do not reflect isolated incidents, but constitute a systematic policy practiced in the context of the ongoing crime of genocide against more than 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, including thousands of detainees held in prisons and military camps. And don't forget the West Bank either. Okay. Here's the one again. 42-year-old Palestinian woman and mother arrested while passing through a checkpoint set up in northern Gaza. So just trying to move freely. She says at dawn she heard the soldiers shouting, saying that morning prayers were forbidden. And I think it was the 4th day after my arrest from Gaza. The soldiers moved me to a place I didn't know because my eyes were blindfolded and they ordered me to take off my clothes. I did so. Of course she did, because otherwise they beat her. They put me on a metal table, pressed my head and chest against it, cuffed my hands to the end of the bed, pulled my legs apart forcefully. She felt the penis penetrate her anus, a man raping her. She started screaming and they beat her on the back of the head while she was blindfolded. She felt the guy raping her finish inside. She kept screaming and being beaten. She could hear a camera, so she believed they were filming. It lasted about 10 minutes, which is an interminable amount of time. After that, they left her for an hour in the same position, cuffed to the bed with metal handcuffs, her face on the bed, feet on the floor, completely naked. Just disgusting the way they treat her. After an hour, again, they did it again. But this time into her vagina also. She was beaten while she screamed. There were several soldiers, and of course they were laughing, and the camera clicking as it took pictures. I don't know what camera clicks now as it takes pictures, but this one was very quick and nobody finished. But during the rape, they beat her with their hands on the back and the back of her head. She says she cannot describe what she felt. Again, she wished for death every moment. After they were done raping her, she was left alone in the room, hands still cuffed to the bed and without clothes for many hours. Just, these people are animals. I could hear the soldiers outside speaking Hebrew and laughing. Of course they did. Later, they took another turn. She screamed, and of course they beat her whenever she tried to resist. After more than an hour, she's not sure about the time. Of course she'd lose track of it. A masked soldier entered, removed her blindfold, lifted his face covering. He had white skin and he was tall. He asked if she spoke English. She said no. He said he was Russian and ordered her to masturbate his penis, and she refused, and then he hit her on the face after raping her. That day she was raped. God, this is so horrible. And this is just story. Again, I'm not going to read all these. I'll post a link to these. These are really, really horrifying and graphic. These are 4 stories here. Every Israeli accusation is a confession. The sick irony to these sadistic revelations is that Israel repeatedly used false claims that, of course, the Palestinians had mass raped Israelis on October 7th to justify actual mass rape. But, of course, the evidence shows that Israel's claims of mass rape on October 7th were false and non-existent. Again, reiterating that Haaretz reported that at Shura base, to which most of the bodies were taken for purposes of ID, there were 5 forensic pathologists at work. In that capacity, they also examined bodies that arrived completely or partially naked in order to examine the possibility of rape, and according to a source knowledgeable about the details, no signs that any of the bodies attesting to sexual relations having taken place or of mutilation of genitalia. No, Muslims are taught to respect female bodies much more. That's why they cover them up with burqa and hijab. Like, it's all just ripped in racism and white supremacy and described. Furthermore, a UN report on the allegations uncovered that, quote, the mission team, specifically for the forensic pathologist and the digital analyst, reviewed over 5,000 photos, around 50 hours, and several audio files of video footage of the attack. Okay, adding that, quote, in the medico-legal assessment of available photos and videos, no tangible indications of rape could be identified. And oh yeah, no witnesses have come forward to claim that happened either. They can't produce one. Here you go, more on Gez. The Israeli prosecutor investigating October 7th even admitted that in the end, we don't have any complaints. We contacted women's rights orgs, asked for cooperation. We were told they simply hadn't been contacted. And you think that if there were one woman that Israel wouldn't be holding her up and using her name every single fucking day? She was again forced to admit that the mass rape claims will not be able to meet the threshold of proof in court because there are none. Finally, a report for the UN Human Rights Council, which investigated again the claims of mass rape on October 7th, found no evidence that it happened and that many of the Israeli claims were provably false because Zaka admitted it, writing, quote, the commission has reviewed testimonies obtained by journalists and the Israeli police concerning rape, but has not been able to independently verify such allegations due to a lack of access to victims, witnesses, and crime sites, and the obstruction of its investigations by the Israeli authorities. I'm going to repeat that. The Israeli authorities have obstructed investigations into whether there was mass rape on October 7th. If there was, wouldn't you think they would want to allow that to prove it? The commission was unable to review the unedited version of such testimonies. For the same reasons, the commission was also unable to verify reports of sexualized torture and genital mutilation. Again, they made it up. Additionally, the commission found some allegations specifically to be false, inaccurate, or contradictory with other evidence or statements discounted, which discounted these from its assessment. They made it up. These fabricated claims were not only used to justify the genocide in Gaza, but also used to justify the actual mass rape detailed in the PCHR report and, of course, previous reports. This is far from the first time we've talked about this. Reef and Colin have talked about this on INN News. I remember distinctly a report back in April that doctors had talked about treating patients that had been sexually tortured coming out of Israeli prisons. This is not a new story. But while Israel's claims of mass rape on October 7th have been debunked, victim testimony after victim testimony shows Israel unleashed real mass rape as official policy in its torture dungeons. Subscribe to The Dissident and support The Dissident, the307.substack.com. But this one is even harder to read. A new report shows that Israel tortured Palestinian children at State Taman, which again torture facility, not prison, torture facility. This was this week, by the way, 3 days ago. This is how they're holding Palestinian men. Blindfolded, handcuffed, behind chicken wire, in a mass cell. I'm guessing that that's people sleeping. As of late, Palestinian hostages released from Israel's barbaric torture dungeons as part of the ceasefire deal have detailed the sadistic torture they endured at the hands of Israel. They're not all making it up. The most recent report from the NGO Defense for Children International documents the sadistic torture that Israeli officials unleashed on Palestinian children brought to the barbaric Israeli torture site, Stay Taman. The report documented the case of 16-year-old Faris Abu Jabal, who was abducted by Israeli forces while searching for aid with his father, alongside about 25 other Palestinians near the Murad corridor the morning of, how fitting, September 11th. The report documented that, quote, an Israeli soldier interrogated Faris, severely beating him after binding his hands and forcing him onto his knees, quoting him saying, quote, he struck my forehead so hard it split open and required stitches, which of course I'm sure he got once he got to prison because he was bleeding profusely. Following this, again, Faris was transferred to Stay Taman, where he was subjected to another brutal interrogation, during which he was handcuffed to a chair with his hands bound behind his back and his legs bound to the legs of the chair. Each time he answered, I don't know, to an interrogator's question, another interrogator beat his head and legs. 16-year-old kid. The report quoted him saying, quote, in these moments I felt nothing but pain, and my sole focus was finding a way to escape the relentless beating and suffering. He would have told them whatever they wanted to know. He was then transferred to the quote-unquote disco room, a concrete room with speakers that blare music in Hebrew. It's sound torture. Faris was quoted saying, quote, they positioned my head right next to the speakers. Of course they did, because they're just monsters. The soldier present, distracted by the sound, was evidently playing a game on his mobile phone. I could tell from his tone that he had just lost, and in his frustration, he'd open the door and unleash a brutal beating on me, striking randomly. I remained in that room until day's end, enduring numerous assaults, including having my head slammed against the wall, being kicked, and having my hair pulled. For the crime of existing. Faris also told Defense for Children International, quote, one of the most challenging moments happened roughly a week prior to my release when a jailer approached me, displayed a photo of my mother in a compromising position through my cell window. They had edited a photo of her alongside a soldier. Look what our soldiers did to your mother. In the image, my mother was lying next to a soldier. I could see her hair. Do you want to go see your mother? Our soldiers raped and killed your mother and sisters. Of course they didn't. Or maybe they did, but I don't think they did. Like he said, they photoshopped it. But horrible. He said that they bound his hands above his head and his legs below, each with a separate cuff, raising him about a meter above the ground. Occasionally, they'd strike his legs. He wet himself frequently during that time. Of course he could. He can't control his bodily functions. They beat him with clubs to his legs and hurled vulgar insults at him, such as son of a bitch and other terms that, of course, he prefers not to repeat. He can't stand for extended periods, and he finds himself constantly seated because he was beaten and tortured, and he needs to recover. The report also documented the case of a 17-year-old, Mahmoud Mayada, who was abducted by Israeli forces the morning of August 7th while he was seeking aid at a GHF site in Rafah, as a humanitarian, quote-unquote, foundation, we extensively covered the monstrosity, murders, and hurting and intentional starvation and suffering they caused there, with American contractors, no less. He was quoted saying, throughout this ordeal, the soldiers relentlessly beat and tortured us. They forced us into stress positions, struck us with sticks, subjected us to electric shocks. And although I was blindfolded the entire time, I could sense the brutality of the beatings and the manner in which they were inflicted. They marked an X on my back, and I understood that anyone bearing this mark would be taken to prison. Again, 17-year-old kid, these are children. Half of Gaza under the age of 18. He added, quote, the crackdown unit launched stun grenades into the room. It's a prison cell. They can't go. Then they conducted a search and removed us from the premises. They pulled me aside, handcuffed me, dislocated my shoulder. I spent about 30 days unable to move my shoulder, enduring constant pain without any medical attention or assistance. Of course not. Why would they? The torture is part of the point. He also said, quote, this unit also subjected me to severe beatings on my chest and other areas of my body, rendering me unconscious. My mental state naturally deteriorated to such an extent that he attempted to take his own life twice. The report also profiled another 17-year-old who was abducted by Israeli forces on the morning of July 11th while seeking aid again at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site in Rafah. Are we sensing a theme here? The NGO Euromed Monitor documented that after the bodies of Palestinian hostages were released from state Haman, quote, medical examinations, forensic reports, and observations by the field team revealed conclusive evidence that many victims were killed after being detained. Their bodies bore clear marks of hanging, rope imprints around their necks, injuries from close-range gunfire, bound hands and feet with plastic restraints and blindfolds. Some bodies were crushed under tank tracks. We showed a picture of that a couple of weeks ago. While others showed severe signs of physical torture, fractures, burns, and deep wounds. The available evidence reveals a horrifying pattern of field executions and systematic torture of Palestinian detainees and prisoners, suggesting a deliberate policy aimed at inflicting the maximum possible physical and psychological suffering on those held up to and including their killing. And what do you think they have in store for the Lebanese? And what do you think they have in store for the Syrians? This is not exclusive to Palestinians either. Israel must be stopped. Other victim testimony recorded by the Palestinian Center for Human Rights showed that Israeli officials committed mass rape against Palestinian men and women at their torture facilities. Again, I'm not reading that one again. We read that one earlier. The recent testimony from the released hostages from State Haman revealed the graphic details of Israel's mass and systemic torture of Palestinians. Again, further revealed, because we've known about this shit for a while. And I brought a third article from The Dissident, which should not surprise anyone, but we've still got to talk about it. Another multi-million-dollar propaganda campaign aimed at Americans. So, have you noticed a lot of pro-Israel bots lately? I specifically noticed a sect of them that are trying to deflect and say, well, if you talk about the genocide that Israel is committing, what about the other genocides around the world? What about Congo? What about Nigeria? What about this? No, we're not doing that. Yes, certainly other genocides are important, but that is not. We're not taking our eye off this ball. we're not taking our eye off the fact that Israel is still torturing and murdering Palestinian children, women, babies, doctors, teachers, healthcare workers, you name it, every day, and starving the entire population. Fuck Israel. Now remember that without U.S. support, Israel would not be able to continue its occupation of Palestine, abuses toward Palestinians, or endless wars in the Middle East. I disagree with that because I think that the UK is providing as much, if not more, support, plus Australia. But certainly it definitely needs the U.S. and it needs the weapons and the money that we're giving them. But I think that they also would be able to figure that out if they didn't get the money from us. Take the genocide in Gaza. Again, he cites Brown University's Cost of War project, which uncovered that the U.S., under the Biden and Trump admins, have already spent over $21 billion in military aid to Israel since the start of the war on October 7, 2023, with an additional $9.6 to $12 billion on military operations in Yemen and the wider region, sparked by or in support of Israeli military operations. That's between 31 and almost 34 billion and counting in U.S. spending. So the Cost of War project also noted that without the U.S. money, weapons, and political support, the Israeli military could not have committed such rapid, widespread destruction of human lives and infrastructure in Gaza. They could have, just not quickly, or escalated its warfare so easily to the regional level by bombing Syria, Lebanon, Qatar, and Iran. It's mostly political support and it's military backing to know that if any of those countries did retaliate against Israel, that the U.S. would also get involved. Without U.S. support, the Israeli government would have no combat aircraft to drop bombs and many fewer bombs. An increasing share of Israel's arsenal would be down for maintenance without U.S. government or U.S. contractor mechanics and spare parts. In addition, Israel's government could not have built a military of its current size and sophistication without U.S. financial backing. Thanks, Zionist douchebags in this country, you fucking assholes. At the same time, more and more Americans are beginning to oppose Israel. God, I can't imagine why. Due to its endless atrocities in Gaza and the West Bank, and its deep manipulation of U.S. politics and foreign policy through various lobbying groups such as AIPAC, J Street, Zionists of America, Beitar, and others. As the Israeli paper Haaretz noted, again, quote, Pew surveys conducted between 2022 and 25 show a rapid decline in support for Israel amid the war in Gaza. Even among conservatives. Wait, you mean conservatives don't like using our money to blow up brown people when we could be using it to give health care to the people here? Some 42% of Americans held a negative view of Israel in 2022. 3 years later, that number jumped to 53%. Still too low, in my opinion. The collapse in support is not limited to Democrats. Half of young Republicans under age 50 now hold a negative view of Israel, up to 15% since the war began. Again, because it's not a war. It's a massacre. It is one side bombing and leveling the entire the area and murdering everybody in that area that isn't running for their lives. This is why, as Haaretz has now revealed, Israel is launching a new multi-million-dollar propaganda campaign targeting Americans in an attempt to shore up American support for Israel and to keep the weapons and cash flow to Israel going. What a shock. Quote, the Israeli government has signed contracts worth millions of dollars in recent months to rehabilitate Israel's standing in American public opinion, both online and offline. $7,000 checks. Amid a sharp drop in support from the conservative right, Israel has hired firms to conduct not just Hasbara campaigns, literally they admit it, but also campaigns targeting millions of Christian churchgoers. You mean the Christian Zionists. Again, there are more Christian Zionists in the United States than there are Jewish Zionists worldwide. Bot networks to amplify pro-Israel messages online. Remember I mentioned that earlier. We've had a few of those in our YouTube comments. And efforts to influence both search results and the responses given by popular AI services like ChatGPT, which conveniently went down this morning. The article went on to report, quote, documents filed over the past 2 months show that the government of Israel, through their foreign ministry, the tourism ministry, and the government advertising agency, 3 different ones, signed multiple contracts in the U.S. to promote Israel's interests, quote unquote. Adding that, quote, payments are routed through Hamas Media Germany GmbH, a subsidiary of the international advertising and public relations giant Hamas. They also, by the way, are advertising on Rumble, and they're buying ads on Rumble. And they're propagandizing Rumble. They're Hamas's brutal war. What? All the hostages have been returned, guys. What are you doing? The investigation uncovered that, quote, the largest of the new Hasbara contracts was signed in August with a firm called Clock Tower X, owned by Brad Parscale, who led a role in Trump's digital campaigns in 2016 and 2020, a $6 million 4-month contract signed between his firm and Hamas Media on behalf of the Israeli government. So $1.5 million a month for 4 months to blanket social media with pro-Israel propaganda. But not just social media, but publishing articles and offline media and television. The Israeli government directed Parscale's company to produce at least 100 core pieces of content per month, including videos, audio, podcast, graphics, and text, and over 5,000 derivative versions monthly, aiming for 50 million impressions a month. Ben Shapiro style numbers. Adding that, quote, 80% of the content will target young Americans on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Again, bots targeting comments. And that, quote, campaign messages will be distributed via Salem Media Network. That's the network that, by the way, is buying the ads on Rumble, a conservative Christian media group that owns more than 200 stations and websites. Again, how convenient. The Salem Media Network produces a long list of staunchly Zionist conservative podcasts and radio shows with personalities including Dinesh D'Souza, Josh Hammer, Laura Trump, Dennis Prager, Larry Elder, Jack Posobiec, and Hugh Hewitt. So basically it's CIA radio. Along with this campaign, Haaretz revealed that Israel is running a similar propaganda campaign in an attempt to manufacture support for Israel's genocide in Gaza and an American war with Iran amongst American evangelical Christians. Guys, you're being manipulated. You're being played by the guys in little hats. Are you not reading this? Are you not paying attention? The report noted, quote, another Israeli campaign commissioned for the foreign ministry was proposed by the Show Faith by Works, owned by Republican consultant Chad Schnitger. I would be very careful. An evangelical operative connected to the Christian right. God, these people just grow on trees, it feels like. The campaign's budget exceeds $3 million, a tenth of which has already been paid to Hamas through a final contract, which has yet, though a final contract has yet to be signed. That could be even more. Filings submitted in September describe a focus on churches and Christian organizations in the Western United States, aimed at countering declining support for Israel among evangelical Christians and raising awareness of Palestinian ties to Hamas and support for terrorism. This, by the way, why don't you just come out and say Utah? Because that's what's going on there. They're going after Utah. Salt Lake City. Utah Valley University, where Charlie Kirk was shot. Haaretz noted, quote, And they want the Mormon community as well. Very deep, devout of evangelical Christians. But again, how it's noted that, quote, according to these documents, these goals will be pursued through biblically based arguments highlighting the importance of Israel and the Jewish people to Christians, end times Catholicism, while spreading messages that the Palestinians chose Hamas. They murder Christian aid workers, not Israelis, which have been murdering them for the last 2 years, and all Palestinian Christians, and the 10% of Gaza was Christian. They celebrated the October 7th massacre and sheltered terrorists. You mean they celebrated their jailers being attacked for a day? Yeah, they did. Palestinians in Iran share genocidal intentions toward Israel. Again, every accusation is a confession, and more. Adding that, quote, the filings for the proposed campaign explain that the messages will reach their audience through the largest geofencing campaign in U.S. history. They're literally going to target specific locations. So when you go to a church, when you drive through a certain area, when you visit a certain location, something's going to show up on your phone. Again, a pitch to map the physical perimeters of every major church and Christian college in California, Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado during worship hours. That's a massive project, by the way. And it's creepily targeting people by their location. It's identifying attendees using commercial data, tracking them, and continuing to target them with relevant ads even after they leave the fucking church. And these rooms won't even have any fucking clue what's happening. That's the sad part. The estimated audience for the suggested project, 8 million churchgoers and 4 million Christian students. That's a pretty big number. That's the targeted audience. That's not how many they expect to actually influence. If they influence 50,000, that's a successful campaign. Along with this, the investigation noted that Israel is using this propaganda campaign to attempt to gain AI bots like ChatGPT and force them to repeat pro-Israel propaganda, writing, quote, a central element of Israel's campaign is its attempt to influence the popular AI chatbots that have exploded in recent years. But if they were on the up and up and what they were doing was legitimate, why would they need to influence with a propaganda campaign? Huh. One clause in the Clock Tower X contract reveals a search and language operation, quote, designed not only to promote the campaign on Google and other search engines, but also to generate framing outcomes in GPT conversations and AI-based dialogue systems. They want to train the AI to be Zionist. And when it's not, shut it down, like they've done with Grok multiple times. By the way, block Grok. You are able to block that account. Block it. Then it can't quote you. It can't look at your account. And you can't see its responses to other people because it's stupid and it lies. And don't take it as anything that's resembling a fact. It is a collection of the inputs that it sees. So what Israel is trying to do here, again, is flood the zone with slop. Zionist slop, so that the GPT that looks at the overall whole will say, oh, well, the overwhelming majority of articles say this, so this must be the case. As part of this work, the firm will also use the search engine optimization software Market Brew AI, which is a predictive AI platform that helps clients adapt to algorithms and promote their work on search engines like Google and Bing to help improve the visibility and ranking of relevant narratives. Again, Market Brew is a legit company. They're a newsletter company built around Mail Brew. All right. But Market Brew is used by companies all over the place, but this is being used for nefarious purposes. More on the Haaretz investigation. Another Israeli campaign disclosed in the Foreign Agents Registration Act filings was signed with SKD Knickerbocker. We talked about them before. Also via Havas for the foreign ministry, worth roughly 2.5 million shekels. Under the contract, the firm, again, actually considered close to the Democratic Party, will develop a bot-based program on various social media channels that floods the zone with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs pro-Israel message. The firm will also recruit up to 5 spokespersons to promote Israeli messages in international media and on social media alongside those bots, which will operate on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And then a separate campaign run by Targeted Communications Global for the tourism ministry will use influencers and commercial content to promote travel to Israel for another cool 1.2 mil. By the way, fuck Haaretz too. They're garbage. But what this investigation shows is that Israel is desperate to run a mass-scale, multifaceted propaganda campaign to get Americans to support Israel. And not even to support Israel, to just ignore what Israel is doing and not be opposed to Israel. Along with this direct government-funded propaganda campaign, Israel has used its U.S.-based pro-Israel billionaires to take part in similar propaganda campaign. People like Bill Ackman. When he last visited the U.S., Netanyahu famously met with Zionist influencers and told them that they had to secure that part of the base of our support in the United States, adding that we're going to have to use the tools of battle. The weapons change over time. We have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we are engaged. And the most important ones are the social media. Just like a fucking boomer. And saying, and the most important purchase that is going on right now is TikTok, #1. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And he made sure it happened with his boy Larry Ellison. Again, speaking of Larry Ellison, Netanyahu was referring to the purchase of TikTok by Larry Ellison, the pro-Israel Oracle founder, who is a personal friend of Netanyahu and the largest private donor to the IDF. And now Ellison's son, David, who is the owner of Skydance Media Production Company, also played a part in this propaganda campaign. What a surprise. Buying Paramount, the parent company of CBS News, and then buying the Free Press and installing the pro-Israel propagandist Barry Weiss as editor-in-chief. Now he's making a bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. Since Weiss was installed as editor of CBS, recent job cuts at CBS News disproportionately hit those whose coverage was critical of Israel, a staffer told Variety. What a surprise! They're purging anyone that questions the narrative. The New York Post reported that Weiss fired journalist Deborah Pata and installed Chris Livesay as the Israel correspondent at CBS News, whom the paper reported showed strong support for Israel, strong support for murdering Palestinian children. With American support for Israel declining, Israel is now more desperate to shore up American support as their mass propaganda campaign, and it's certainly not doing anything to help the narrative that Jews and Zionists control the media. Again, not just Jews, Zionists specifically. Zionists that are in support of advancing the Greater Israel Project, which I have repeatedly said should not be allowed to exist, nor should Israel as a country. Fuck Israel. This man is a Pulitzer Prize winner, a Nobel Prize winner, Mossab Abu Toha, journalist. He says, I'm running out of words as I watch the devastating scenes of rainwater flooding people's tents in the Gaza streets. This was 4 days ago. I talked to my family and my wife's, all our relatives who live in tents in the street and deeply suffering. I'm disgusted with a world that has allowed Gaza to continue suffering even after the so-called quote-unquote ceasefire. Not a single house has been rebuilt. On the contrary, Israeli terrorist forces are blowing up more houses in areas of Gaza than they're still occupying. There are babies who may not survive the cold, and yet, who cares? He's posting this so everyone can see. He's posting this because he will never forgive or forget. He's posting this so future generations will witness the cruelty of the occupation and the leaders, as well as those who support them, who enable this suffering. People like Barry Weiss. People like Larry Ellison. This is inside their tent. Look at how deep the water is. This is outside the tent. Kids' feet totally submerged. So we got that. This is a wider shot. More than 35,000 tents were flooded with heavy rainwater across the strip on Friday. Torrential rains. Mahmoud Abbas, really? Palestinian children are disappearing in Gaza while seeking food. They never make it back home. 6 or more have gone missing in the latest count. And here's a larger, wider shot. Over 35,000 tents again. Mohammed Safa, I believe he is the UN representative. Heavy rainwater across Gaza, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, is an act of genocide. Shame on our country, shame on the world for allowing this to happen. Then there's this story. Now, what's really interesting is that this actually came out like 2 months ago, but somehow really surfaced this week. This account, the International Cyber Digest, says, we've had multiple reports in the comment section indicating that the app is present on more Samsung device types and regions than the sources first told us. What are we talking about here? Well, back on November 14th, this account reported that there's unremovable Israeli spyware, which was found on all Samsung devices. Well, not all. Samsung faces backlash over App Cloud, an Israeli-developed app pre-installed on budget Galaxy A and M series devices. Some of you in the chat may have an M device right now, for all we know. Investigations reveal that this app is embedded in the operating system, preventing full removal. Even when disabled, App Cloud remains on the device, reappears after updates, and can covertly install additional software. Wait, what? How the fuck does Samsung allow something like this to happen? And now we find that it's not just the A and the M series, but the scope is even bigger than we thought. What's going on here? Well, our friend the McGuire posted the receipts back from September 18th at Quds Network, which said that a recent report revealed that AppCloud, an Israeli application developed by Iron Source, comes pre-installed on certain Samsung devices, particularly Galaxy A and M models, and cannot be fully removed. The app automatically collects user data, including location, device fingerprints, and IP addresses. Why would they need to do that? Okay. An Israeli war criminal recently boasted at a press conference that anyone who owns a mobile phone carries a piece of Israel in their hands, proudly highlighting Israel's deep infiltration into tech and global industries, including smartphones. So that's not good. Throw away your galaxies. Abu Bakr Abed also mentioned this months ago that Mahmoud Abu Musalam is a cybersecurity engineer in Gaza right now, writing so significantly about Samsung breaching the privacy of users and collecting the information for the Israeli army. So many in Gaza hold Samsung devices. Samsung is complicit in the genocide in Gaza. All right. And then there was some info about this. And again, I'll put all the links in the description afterwards. But Eye on the Sky actually shows the screenshots of exactly what App Cloud is allowed to do. Have full network access, view network connections and Wi-Fi connections. Of course, run at startup. Download files without notification. Read Google service configuration, including your emails. Measure app storage space. Why would they need to do that? I guess to be able to know if it could be installed. Run a foreground service. Advertising ID permission. Query all packages. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. It can also prevent the phone from sleeping. And run a foreground service with the type special use. I don't know who gets that permission or knows how to execute something like that. Further, it's described in the App Store or on the phone when you go for more info. It offers the Aura out-of-the-box experience. It is some kind of post-install recommended apps set up from the carrier. Bullshit. The carrier doesn't even know about it. It's done from the manufacturer. It asks for your age and gender, then recommends that you install popular apps. Developed by IronSource, an Israeli advertising company. It has way too many permissions. Okay. See the Universal Android debloater, and you can learn more about that. So fuck Israel for doing all of that and putting this kind of tracking software. And remember when they said that they could like blow up your phone or that they can control or track or monitor from anywhere? It's using apps like this on a Samsung phone. I'm not done with fuck Israel yet. Okay. This is a crazy video and interview that was done with one of the people who was on the global Samud flotilla. All right, we talked about that and how they were arrested. So I want to play this video. This is the testimony, but I have it in video form, and it's easier to just watch the 2 minutes. And we'll read if there's more that context, but check this out.
I saw him coming, and then he looked at me. Like I could tell like that he was probably looking for me, because he was like looking and then asking people. And then there was one person who pointed at me, and then he came around and then he stopped right next to me. And that's when he called me, terrorist, and that I will be treated like a terrorist.
And you felt immediately that you needed to talk back.
And I told him that he's, yeah. Because, the Israel, like, and you can tell with everyone there, that they have the sense of arrogance. They really truly believe that what they're doing is right. They truly believe that there is no genocide. They truly believe that they are not starving children. They truly believe that a baby in a mother's womb is a terrorist. They truly believe all of these things. They are in this bubble of like pure terror. They are surrounded by violence. And the only reason they are surrounded by violence is because they are bringing the violence, I don't think I could be a violent person because I don't feel violence inside of me. Because this is not how I feel when I look at human beings, So you really, really have to hate something so much to believe that the violence that you're bringing is not violence, that it's a righteous thing, that this is what they deserve. So, and when you have someone like that in front of you, I mean, obviously I'm not going to sit down and let him talk to me like that. Not because I'm taking it personal. He can say whatever to me. I'm not taking it personal, but for the Palestinians. To let him know that we see what they're doing and that the Palestinian population is not alone.
That's brave and courageous. So what had happened was this woman is Jewish, European, and was on the flotilla, and Ben-Gvir sought her out. So this is Yasmin Akar. Ben-Gvir came to me very close and said, "You're a terrorist and you will be treated as a terrorist in the coming days." I got up and told him he's a coward. I was like, what the fuck? She said, "Being back is intense. This was my second imprisonment in Israel since June. I didn't rest because the work continues. I've been traveling, doing advocacy, meeting organizations to help liberate Palestine. Since the ceasefire, we're still seeing Palestinians being killed. The flotillas didn't stop when we're detained. The Samud flotilla took over a month before interception. Technical issues, Tunisia, harsh weather, being bombed in Tunis, then bombed again in international waters. Finally, we were intercepted. 42 boats, 462 activists, violently. They already knew some of us. They approached me, Mandela, Greta, Tiago by name because they had been there before. Near Ashdod, they switch. First nice, then brutal. I'd been handcuffed, called names. Some made sexual comments. They handed us to police, controlled by Ben-Gvir. I was shocked to see him. Getting to the kneeling area was horrific. They dragged me, pushed me down. When I turned my head, I saw security, and then I saw Itamar himself. Shock and disbelief. I told my comrade, "We can't allow this." I started chanting. I'd written "Free Palestine" on my shirt because they don't allow Palestinian symbols. When he came, I sat straight. I showed him the shirt. I chanted "Free Palestine" and called him a baby killer. Everyone started chanting. They told me to be quiet. I said no. I stood. They grabbed my neck, surrounded me, threw me down, beat me. They handcuffed me again and pulled me up by the cuffs. I kept speaking, telling them that they're committing genocide, starving people, killing babies, and that there will be an end to Israel. Can you imagine that? Saying that to them as they're beating you? They dragged me to where there were cameras, pushed me down, smashed my head to the ground, kicked me in the sides. They dragged me into the Ashdod hall. The women officers are brutal. They beat me again. Tried to take my shirt off. I refused. They put me facing the wall, told me to open up my legs, and kept kicking them. They slammed me into the wall, pulled my hair, stripped me naked. I guess they got the shirt off, mocked me, called me names, told me it would be worse this time. They recognized me. I recognized some of them, probably from their fucking awful TikTok dances. Then interrogation, photos, fingerprints, threats. American Jewish citizens were treated differently than Middle Eastern or North African people. Zionism, like she said, is racist. They have a problem with Muslims. Muslim women were forced to remove hijabs. They laughed. They humiliated Muslims. People of color were mistreated. Palestinians, of course, were treated the worst. One officer said to her, "You're German, but you're not German. Your country committed the real genocide." I said, genocide is genocide, and Germany's crimes don't justify theirs. My Adalah lawyer was next to me. Later, Ben-Gvir came again, and he said, quote, "You're a terrorist, and you will be treated as a terrorist in the coming days," unquote. I stood up and told him that he's a coward, that we will hunt him down, that he's a baby killer, and the world won't look away. He called me a terrorist again. I again said, he's a coward, and he rushed out. Because you can be sure that that motherfucker doesn't have anybody talk back to him and treat him with disrespect. Ever. So it must have shocked him to hear someone as a prisoner like that speak to him that way. Good. They believe there's no genocide, like she said. All right. They live in a bubble. They bring the violence. This was the most amazing, remarkable line. I wasn't going to sit and let him speak like that. Palestinians can't talk back to soldiers. It's my duty to speak for them. I used my privilege, being from Europe with a strong passport, to speak for Palestinians. That's amazing. After that, it was interrogation, then deportation. And she reminds us and herself that anything I go through is nothing compared to what the oppressed face. I don't live under bombs. Losing a job shows I'm on the right path. They try to cancel me because truth stays. I'm not the movement. Palestinians are. She says that she'll continue. Global capitalism is why this is happening. Everyone profits from suffering. Amen, sister. When Palestine is free, the work doesn't end. The fight against colonialism and imperialism has to continue because they're not going to rest if they lose. When I was young, I thought I would change the world. Later, I realized maybe I would start with small steps that spark others. My heart burns for justice. I cannot stop. That was awesome. Again, she shames the whole of Israel. Amazingly courageous. Yasmin Akhar, German. And then we've got also, this is another crazy story. David Cronin, who actually is also on Substack, boasting of transparency. He writes this for the Electronic Intifada and Indie Media Award honoree. One of the top independent outlets. Go follow them at electronicintifada.net. Boasting of transparency, the EU won't say who paid for an Israeli propaganda trip. So David is in the UK. All right. The European Union is refusing to say if Israel has paid for activities undertaken by a prominent official. That would be a problem. Katharina von Schnurbein, the EU's coordinator for combating anti-Semitism, visited Israel in late May for what was essentially a propaganda tour. During it, she dismissed the well-documented evidence that massacres were being carried out in Gaza as rumors about Jews. Really? Exactly who footed the bill for the trip, which involved discussions with Gideon Sa'ar, Israel's foreign minister, has not been disclosed. The EU's executive, the European Commission, has invoked data protection rules to reject the FOIA request made seeking details about the trip's costs and whether Israel covered them. Should be a very basic question: who paid for this trip? The European Commission's secrecy over this matter exposes as laughable a recent claim by one of its spokespersons that it is among the world's most transparent public institutions. As a basic minimum, a transparent body would be upfront about who pays for activities carried out by its employees, wouldn't it? In a lengthy reply to my request, while saying no, the European Commission suggested that von Schnurbein needs to be shielded from scrutiny. Why? The person, even though she is not a high-level official and does not form part of the senior management of the EU, has already been the subject of journalistic articles attacking not only her professional capacities, but also her personal character, the reply stated. Well, when you deny and whitewash genocide, they tend to do that. And of course, it didn't cite any examples of such articles because they don't exist. The reply amounts to willful deception. Von Schnurbein, a Bavarian aristocrat, may not be at the top of Brussels' hierarchy. Nonetheless, she is a representative of the EU and is authorized to speak on its behalf. She belongs to the central administration of the European Commission, answering directly to the Nazi Ursula von der Leyen, the institution's president. The European Commission's insistence on secrecy indicates that it wishes to conceal details about von Schnurbein Schnurrbein's close relationship with Israel and its network of lobbyists. Again, what do you have to hide? If Israel paid for it, that's a problem. If the EU paid for her to go on a propaganda trip, that's also a problem. Revelations about this Israel trip in May have already proven embarrassing. The website EU Observer has published an internal paper showing that von Schnurbein made bizarre allegations during it about her own colleagues who had taken action in support of Palestinians. These included the allegation that a bake sale organized by some Brussels officials to raise funds for a Red Cross Gaza appeal risked causing ambient anti-Semitism. Because yes, when you shed a light on the fact that Israel is murdering Palestinians, people tend to not like Israel as much. Yeah, that happens. The revelations prompted calls by human rights activists and some lawmakers for von Schnurbein to be removed from her post, and she should be. Von Schnurbein's job contract makes no reference to Israel or any other foreign country for that matter, as her responsibilities are limited to fighting anti-Semitism within Europe. It follows that her work should be financed solely by European governments. Under rules applying to Brussels officials, von Schnurbein is required to only act in the European Union's interests, not on behalf of any external Middle Eastern state. She's obligated to seek permission from the EU's hierarchy before accepting any gifts. Also, remember that the UK and that Great Britain exited the EU, Brexit. So they're not even part of this. The US and Great Britain are not part of this. That would include trips that are paid for by foreign governments or pressure groups. All right. But the German government is certainly very close with the Israeli government now. There are elements within the Swiss government, the ones that arrested Ali Abu Nima, that are Zionist aligned. You've got even parts of Turkey and parts of France. Macron is aligned with Israel, even though he's been critical occasionally. They're all pro-Israel. But they're not allowed. This person should be acting in the best interests of Europe, not Israel. But did they just buy off yet another person who's influential? It's not the first time the EC has withheld basic information about her activities specifically. In a separate FOIA request, he sought details of how many staff have been allocated to her office and what tasks those staff have been assigned. Again, the most transparent agency in Europe should be willing to disclose that. Although the European Commission rejected the request on data protection grounds, I've learned from a well-placed source that von Schnurbein heads a team of 6. That means she has far greater resources than Marion Lalisse, the EU's coordinator against anti-Muslim hatred. Lalisse has no staff aiding her work. So 6 people to help the anti-Semitism one, no staff to help the anti-Muslim one. That fact alone speaks volumes about how skewed the EU's priorities are, especially because there's a massive influx of Muslims that have come in the last decade thanks to all the refugees. Rather than sticking to her actual job of protecting European Jews from persecution, which is still anti-Zionism, is not anti-Semitism, von Schnurbein has weaponized anti-Semitism in order to smear Israel's critics. She and Jonathan Greenblatt must be peas in a pod. She's done so with the help of a fairly sizable team. Jonathan Greenblatt being from the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, which everyone in this country has realized is over-the-top, ridiculous propaganda. By contrast, the fights against hatred of Muslims and racism more generally have just been given lip service by top politicians in Brussels. Worse, those politicians are encouraging xenophobia by pursuing policies hostile to refugees, like I mentioned. Ursula von der Leyen, lest it be forgotten, gave her complete backing to Israel's genocidal war against Gaza in its initial stages. Her German compatriot, Katharina von Schnurbein, has gone to extremes in trying to downplay Israel's most egregious crimes as mere rumors and smearing those spreading the rumors. No, I've seen videos of headless fucking babies in Gaza. Those are rumors? It's disgusting that she denies that exists. As the EU has enabled and excused the attempted extermination of Palestinians, nobody should be surprised that it's trying to hide some key details. So, a little bit of European internal politics, but fuck Israel, because it's not just about controlling the United States and our media and our narrative, but also doing it overseas as well. Not just in England, not just in Australia, but also in the EU. All right. So that's our lengthy fuck Israel segment. Thank you for sticking with me through that. Fuck Israel, like we say every week, because if they didn't do all that, we wouldn't have to report on it, and then we wouldn't have to say that every week. Justice is coming. I really wish that were the case, but and that right soon, I know what that is, and I don't even want to mess around with that right now. Terrible. Support independent media if you can. Again, Electronic Intifada, Indie Media Award honoree. Went to a few of them here. That's our wall of fame. Those are the people that have actually supported INN with some kind of tip. Patreon monthly support, Substack subscription, Stripe tip, Cash App, Ko-fi. Those are the ways to do it. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. By the way, I saw Talking Wombat. You see in top left corner, one of the very first patron supporters hanging out in chat right now on Substack. Thank you so much. Love you. Appreciate you still being around after all this time. Okay, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. We got paypal.me/Indie News Network. IndieNewsNow.com, where you can watch this show live. You can check out independent news completely free and ad-free. And you can also get merch. We got merch there too. And we can also get over at Substack, IndieMediaToday.com and INNNewsletter.com. We got two different Substacks that I support and publish to. See you next Tuesday. So support independent media. Like I said, we need it more than ever. I'll see you next week. And I love you all, fam. Have a good night. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe?
Who are these people?
Normally, we warm up before we get into a fuck Israel segment, but this week I got so much, I'm jumping right into it. A lot of you people may know Eleanor Goldfield. She's an independent live streamer, podcaster, journalist, part of the Project Censored, and she and Lee Camp are I think they're married. I know they have a kid together. Pretty sure they're married too. But she wrote an article about international law isn't for the oppressed. And this is specifically about the UN vote on Palestine and the abstention of China and Russia, and basically them allowing for genocide to continue. So Eleanor writes that it was November 29th, 10 days from now, and 78 years ago. I'm not sure if looking at pictures of it remind me of Dr. Strangelove because of the black and white photography in 1940 styling, or because of the immense evil that room was about to unleash. horrors and terrorism that they couldn't possibly have conceived of then. That with their fleeting votes, they would ultimately usher in the world's first live-stream genocide. Not to give them too much credit, as they were flippant enough about the forthcoming Nakba, which, when it came, resulted in almost 750,000 Palestinians being ethnically cleansed from their homelands. Again, that is the picture of the UN General Assembly from November 29th, 1947. Okay? When it didn't stop there, because genociders never stop, they must be stopped. Papers were filed, speeches made, concerns raised, but the horrors continued. At any point in the past 78 years, the UN could have circled back to its initial creation of Israel and taken actual steps to combat it, but it never did. And on Monday, November 17th, the UN Security Council voted unanimously, with China and Russia abstaining, to accept the U.S. plan for Gaza, which is nothing short of continued ethnic cleansing and essentially a slow-moving genocide. Palestinians were not included in the vote because they never are. With this decision, the UN once again showed its foundational ideology, its raison d'être. Okay, if colonialism is the battering ram for capitalism, then the UN is the sandpaper, ensuring those being bludgeoned to death don't get any splinters. For instance, it's worth noting that while the U.S. has a seat at the UN, the hundreds of indigenous tribes, even recognized by the U.S. law, do not. Sweden has a seat at the UN, but the Sami, whose ancestral lands negate the borders of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia, do not. India has a seat at the UN. Kashmir does not. Indeed, the UN has since 1947, faithful year at that, been discussing and debating what it calls the India-Pakistan question. You'll notice that Kashmir is not even mentioned. And still, no action has been taken with regards to using international pressure on India. The UN is a colonial project built of nation states which ultimately seeks to protect and defend the colonialist structure of the nation state. It created Israel, after all. And while there are, of course, good intentions and righteous people who work within its confines, the problem is, in fact, those confines. It is the global nation-state conglomerate that doesn't just allow for atrocities to take place, but demands it. The creation and upkeep of nation-states must be violent, as it's based on the colonialist framework of othering, bordering, and supremacy, all of which are imposed structures that can only be imposed with violence. The UN was never for the oppressed. It was never going to be an escape hatch for the cyclical violence of nation-state upkeep. It's a part of that violence, even when it attempts to rein it in. It legitimizes that violence by engaging with it as a foregone conclusion of our world, the best we can do, what we've always done. It is therefore also engaged in the violence of abolishing memory, of protecting and uplifting the ways in which we've built and thrived outside of the nation-state paradigm. When it comes to justice and liberation, at best, the UN is useless. At worst, it whitewashes and excuses the true nature and intentions of the colonialist and imperialist network it serves. Man, that is a powerful statement right there. Again, that's not to say that the UN doesn't do good work. It's the charity event in a capitalist framework. Charity events and organizations also have a very clear and positive effect on the people who are deemed worthy enough to receive it. But the framework that charity hides is grotesque, and their cover-up is likewise so. In short, the UN, as part of the architecture of our oppression, will likewise be part of the ashes of the empire if and when we rise from them. And the fire's already burning. As we stare down climate chaos and the continued destabilization of the global nation-state conglomerate, because it's been replaced by the corporate oligarchy state, we will see more and more that the imperial core will dig deeper and deeper to its roots, for it knows only one way to solve problems, and that's through more violence and more oppression. It's therefore vital that we do more than fight, leaning back on our heels. Right? Our goal must be to abolish the entire architecture of this global oppression. This requires understanding of distinct but parallel histories, of so-called modernity, of heritage buried beneath the rubble, and lots of imagination. It requires the solidarity of the shaken, where we, with broken hearts and maddened minds, confront an unacceptable reality and every day, in small fractured ways, make worlds. We're not alone in this. We have lessons from many people in many places at many times, but we must dig to find them, to find each other, and to never look to those aiding our oppressors for liberation. Some people might even say that would, it's funny. Topher says something about you're really close. They believe that they're important, but in the end, they just like to hear themselves talk. They're representatives of the owner and donor class is what it is they don't make those decisions. The UN is a U.S. appendage, not just a U.S., but a Western civilized appendage. The way that they put the sanctions out to Russia, but won't do anything about Israel, just shows just how toothless that institution is, as toothless as the ICJ, unfortunately. So this one made me think, and I wanted to bring that kind of as a warm-up and something to think about, that while it is Israel, remember that it's every other nation that stands by and voted outside of the Arab nations to allow Israel to exist in the first place, and that continues to acknowledge it as a legitimate nation state that they should continue to do business with and deal with. They shouldn't. Fuck Israel. Fuck the UN. The way that they've been whitewashing and ignoring. Look, they had UNRWA set up, and they've bailed. They haven't fought at all to keep their people there. Not hard enough, at least. They haven't gone and lobbied to every nation on the country in the world to say, look at what these people are doing to our innocent people that are there to feed starving people. I don't hear Antonio Guterres doing that at all. I don't know why he's still the Secretary General. Well, because he won't hold them accountable, so he keeps his job. Again, fuck Israel. I've talked about this guy before. Guy Christensen. All right. This is an interesting video that he made, and a short one, detailing that he was a senior in high school when Israel began this genocide. He's now been kicked out of college. Ohio State University. We covered that he was expelled for protesting against the genocide and camping out. He did nothing wrong. He committed no crime.
I was just a senior in high school, 17 years old, when Israel launched their genocide against the Palestinian people. And I knew I had to speak up. That's what I did. And years later, I'm 19, about to turn 20. We've reached hundreds of millions of people with our message of peace and humanity. This year we raised over $500,000 to feed people in Gaza directly on the ground, something we're still doing now. And it feels like I've come almost full circle, because at the end of this month, I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak to high school students about how they can use social media to elevate their voices and make change in this world. And we need more people doing this. We need more activists. We need more people on the ground, more people using their voices online. It's so important. And I mean, to me, I'm just blessed. I'm just very blessed. I don't have to be in Gaza under Israeli occupation, under the boot, under bombs, under starvation. I don't have to be in a prison here in the United States detained for my legal status. I don't have to be in Sudan, who's undergoing another genocide. I'm honored to be blessed to be supported by you guys, to be elevated in the position that you guys put me in, and I'm thankful for it. And I mean, if you want to come see me at the end of this month at the Palestine Convention, you can check out them at palestineconvention.org. It would be nice to meet you guys. Anyways, thank you. And free Palestine.
I think that was earlier this month, and that was in LA. He went and did that. He actually just did a video today on his Instagram about Palestine Cola and about two Palestinian guys that are trying to basically, create a BDS version and send the proceeds and the profits to support Palestinian people. Yeah, I agree. He's even more cool than when I was his age, for sure. He's certainly aware of what the hell's going on and setting himself up to be some kind of a leader. And he's, he can articulate beautifully and really summarize stuff. And again, he connects with people very well. Guy Christensen, your favorite guy, I believe, on Twitter. And if you look him up, you'll find him all over the place. He's on Facebook. Amazingly enough, they tried to kick him off, but he's been reinstated. Vedmore is in Johnny Vedmore, D to T. Yes, it is Johnny Vedmore. We're going to talk about Johnny Vedmore in a little bit. But we're still on our Fuck Israel segment, so we're going to continue that. This one's going to kind of upset some people, and it even upset me, but I have not really seen an article talking about the embarrassment of the Jewish community because of what Israel is perpetrating. And while this is from somebody who is with, if not now, Boston, I believe is the organization she represents, and some of the things she says I completely disagree with. I, again, wanted to bring this because she articulates some of the things about dealing with family that I've personally had to deal with, and it really hit me. So she writes this article. It says, 2 years after October 7th, where is our movement headed? This is Alyssa Rubin. I've never read Alyssa Rubin before. This came across my feed, and I clicked on it, and I'm like, interesting. The Jewish community is at a crossroads when it comes to Israel's genocide. As organizers, it's our job to bring them along. Can't argue with anything she's saying right there. But we're gonna move on. As the tenuous ceasefire in Israel and Gaza goes into effect, she's brought back to October 7th. That morning she woke up, checked her phone, and my stomach dropped. Okay, the moment I saw the news about the Hamas attack, I could already see the horror that was about to unfold before us. Less than a week later, I found myself sitting on the floor of Elizabeth Warren's office as Israel ordered the entire population of northern Gaza, 1 million people, to evacuate within 24 hours. In Boston, it was almost sundown on the first Shabbat since October 7th. We sat there singing songs about peace that we learned in Hebrew school, sharing stories of grandparents who survived the Holocaust, and crying out for our progressive Massachusetts senator to use her power to push for a ceasefire. Yeah, good luck with that. As we sat there, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. It was my grandpa, calling to wish me a Shabbat Shalom, as he does every Friday. I silenced the call. There were 7 of us in that office. It would be nearly another week before the first member of Congress called for a ceasefire. Day by day, my fear and outrage grew as I watched more members of the Jewish community, including many rabbis and leaders who had recently begun speaking out against the Israeli government, double down in support of Israel's retaliatory assault on Gaza. There was no room to question Israel's increasingly brutal attacks. Never mind the long-term implications of Israel's system of occupation, apartheid, and siege. There was no room to grieve the deaths of the 1,200 Israelis killed on October 7th without our communal and political leaders twisting our grief to justify attacks on Gaza. And certainly there was no room for the humanity of the millions of Palestinians now facing relentless bombing, displacement, hunger, and disease. I told you I didn't agree with everything this article said. To be Jewish and call for a ceasefire in October of 2023 was a profoundly isolating experience that I felt on a deeply personal level. I think Alyssa's a lot more religious and plugged in than I am personally. I didn't feel like it was a profoundly isolating experience. I disagree with that, but that's her opinion, and and what her lived experience. She said, in the weeks after and months after October 7th, I couldn't bear to talk to my grandpa, one of the people I love and respect most in the world. I couldn't endure hearing Yoav Gallant's threats to annihilate all of Gaza echoed in my grandpa's voice, the voice that sang to me as a baby and led Kiddush at Shabbat dinner every week. The voice that cried out to save my brother from walking into a busy street as a small child. I've never been able to square my grandpa's unconditional love for my brother and me with the violent ideology he supports when it comes to Palestine. This is a real thing that people in the Jewish community are dealing with. Last month, I opened my phone, and this time I saw my rabbi being arrested in Senator John Thune's office alongside dozens of other rabbis calling for food aid to be let into Gaza. I had to check twice to make sure what I was seeing was real. 2 years ago, the majority of the coalition of voices speaking out today against the Israeli government's genocidal actions was defending those very actions. What we're seeing now is an unprecedented communal shift. A new and growing liberal left alliance united against Israel's mass starvation and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza. There is no longer any way for any right-wing Jewish and non-Jewish institutions to claim that the Jewish community stands unequivocally in support of Israel's siege of Gaza, or to simply write off dissidents as irreverent and marginal. Every major Jewish movement in the United States, from the Reform movement to over 80 Orthodox clergy, has now publicly criticized Israel's tactics of mass starvation and indiscriminate killing. That's a bare minimum. But those speaking out are clergy, synagogue members, elected officials, parents, young people, and elders of every race, generation, and denomination and gender. The dam has broken. I don't want to gloss over the very real tensions and misalignments that exist within that coalition. There are plenty, or how much work lies ahead of us to make meaningful political change, because that's not the way to actually do it. There is discomfort with using or not using the word genocide still, different relationships to Zionism, and disagreement with what it looks like to hold the humanity of both Palestinians and Israelis in our messaging. Oh my God. Again, that's liberal nonsense. That's just kowtowing and catering to the liberal bullshit brunch crowd. But holding the humanity of both Palestinians and Israelis means that they both have the right to exist, to live, and to live equally, with equal rights. It's not hard. But the fact that these are the conversations that we're even having reflects an undeniable shift in the center of power of the Jewish community. And I think that that is absolutely a fact. All right? Because it has shifted the narrative. It's even so slightly, but the narrative was get them and, spewing the hasbara of the nonsense. I don't even want to repeat the lies that were perpetrated and still are by the Barry Weisses and plenty. But a lot of people are actually realizing, oh shit, the IDF actually did call for the Hannibal Directive. You mean the Apache helicopters are the ones that actually took out the cars? You mean they actually did pull the people off the wall the morning of October 7th? And that they actually were warned in advance and yeah, all of that. And now all of a sudden you're starting to see the questions asked, and it's way too late. Honestly, I agree. But it's important to acknowledge that a shift in American Jews towards Israel is important, because without American Jewish support, that's why they're going after the Charlie Kirks and the Christian Zionists, because they're losing us. And now they're losing the Christian Zionists too. The Candace Owens, as much as I can't stand her, she's figuring it out. This shift didn't happen because people just woke up one day and decided to act differently. It happened because we, as just one part of the broader movement for Palestinian freedom, have created the conditions for people to move. We've been consistent in our demands from the beginning. Since the day after, on October 8th, 2023, we've demanded a ceasefire, a full hostage exchange, an end to apartheid occupation. And that full hostage exchange is on both sides. That includes the 10,000 plus Palestinians that are sitting in Israeli jails right now, especially the ones that were put there without charge or trial and that sit there indefinitely. People like Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, that's been there just about a fucking year already. Free Dr. Hussam Abu Safia. All right. Full hostage exchange, end to apartheid and occupation, and equality and justice for all Palestinians and Israelis, which means they get a homeland, which means they get right of return, which means they get the right to govern themselves and the right to create a military. That's giving them a country. That's if you want a two-state solution. I believe that's not even possible. I believe Israel cannot exist as a two-state solution. They will not live in harmony with the Palestinian people. They will make sure that it is crushed, and Bibi's already said so multiple times. So therefore, it must be a one-state solution where everybody lives together equally. Alyssa continues, and she says that we brought 2,000 Jews to shut down the White House. We've demanded that our elected officials reject AIPAC money. We knocked on doors in Pittsburgh and St. Louis and Westchester County, New York, to defend some of the only members of Congress who were willing to stand up to AIPAC's genocidal agenda. How'd that work out for them? Not so great. Westchester County was Jamal Bowman. He got primaried out. St. Louis was Cori Bush. She got primaried out. Pittsburgh, I'm not even sure who Pittsburgh was. I think that was when Harris went to Pittsburgh and they protested. We showed up by the thousands when Mahmoud Khalil and Ramesia Ozturk were abducted for their Palestine activism earlier this year by the Trump administration, which we covered extensively on How Do We Miss That? And now it seems that we've achieved some of our basic demands as Israel and Hamas enter into a tenuous, fragile ceasefire. It's not really a ceasefire. Israel's never stopped killing anyone any day. The hostages have been released. No, the Israeli hostages have been released. Some aid is entering Gaza, a woeful, pitiful amount. And for now, the daily onslaught of violence has slowed. Despite the fact that this movement is exactly what we've been fighting for, this victory is painful. The journey to get here has been catastrophic and devastating in ways that are difficult to put into words. In the 2+ years that it's taken to get here, we have not been able to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza and hundreds more in the West Bank, including her friend Adwa, a leader from al-Khair, a tiny village in Masfer Yatta. And what makes this moment even more fraught is that many of the people who are joining our cries for a ceasefire and end to starvation are some of the very people who defended Israel's right to drop bombs and murder entire Palestinian families, who saw images of starving children and placed the blame solely on Hamas and preached unconditional support for Israel from the pulpit, who called us self-hating Jews when we dared to call for a ceasefire. They're the communal and political leaders who could have leveraged their power at any point in the last 2 years to save countless lives. Fuck all of them. There have been many calls for the reckoning that these leaders must undergo if they're to be trusted members of our movements. I agree. No, they're just not to be trusted members of our movements anymore, and we need new leaders, and leaders who won't capitulate and even consider working with people like that anymore. Our people have serious work to do. And I want to talk about the work that we need to do as organizers if we're serious about achieving our goals, because the stakes are unbelievably high. This victory is a significant one, but we have a long, long fight ahead of us. There has been no victory. What you're talking about is a victory in rhetoric where you've moved the goalpost like slightly. People are still getting killed. Israel is still being held without impunity, taking over Syria, taking over Lebanon. All these other things are still going on. You haven't stopped any of it, but you're somehow patting yourself on the back. That bothers me. Right now, we have a critical window of opportunity to translate this massive wave of energy into real political change. It's not a straight shot. Yeah, you could say that for sure. And it's not a guarantee, 100%. But we are closer than we have ever been before to winning an arms embargo. The only real meaningful course of action to end Israel's system of apartheid and occupation and ensure lasting peace. We talked about that story about Rafi UK that got shut down because it was exposed as an intel front a couple of weeks ago. Declassified did a great story about that. For the first time, there's a legislative vehicle in Congress, the Block the Bombs Act, which is H.R. 3565. Of course, that's going to expire in about 4 weeks and be meaningless. But that had an unprecedented coalition of co-sponsors, including the entire Congressional Progressive Caucus. Bet you didn't know that. Of course, it costs them nothing to do that right now because they know that it won't pass, so they can say that they're for it while knowing it won't pass. Several Jewish representatives. That actually is a risk to them, to their donors, and some representatives who were once backed by AIPAC. 6 in 10 voters oppose the U.S. sending more arms to Israel, yet we're doing it anyway. And the Jewish community is openly grappling with existential questions about our community's historically uncritical support for Israel. Again, conflating Judaism and Israel, by the way, quite a bit here, I notice, and Zionism and it's, again, these are mental gymnastics that people like are going to have to get through. But she's almost there, like Topher said. We have between now and the 2028 presidential election, oh God, to cement support for an arms embargo as the mainstream position in both the Democratic Party and in the U.S. Jewish community. Apparently, she doesn't acknowledge that donors exist and where they support. The former is going to take a strong, multifaceted coalition that can go up against weapons manufacturers, AIPAC, the fossil fuel industry, and the entire military-industrial complex. We have a role to play in that coalition. The role is to be patted on the head and ignored and dismissed. The latter is our responsibility. We have 3 years to organize our synagogues, our cultural organizations, our day schools, our JCCs, our summer camps, and our political organizations that are all funded by Zionists, by the way, into a powerful movement that can say unequivocally and forcefully that Jewish safety and Palestinian safety are intertwined. Well, they are. That we refuse to let one more bomb drop in our name. Again, that's just liberal rhetoric. Liberals love bombs dropping. Sorry, they do. They just don't want to have to look at it or deal with it. That's part of the coalition she's looking to embrace. The Kamala Harrises of the world. Sorry, never going to happen. The support of the Jewish community is not a nice to have. It is essential. Without airtight support from the Jewish community, the political right will continue to capitalize on its extremely effective and cynical strategy of using anti-Semitism to attack, weaken, and criminalize the Palestinian rights movement, a strategy that has serious ramifications for the very foundations of our democracy. They're almost there. Our ability to accomplish this feat hinges on whether we're able to hold together this nation liberal left coalition, which we won't be able to, on whether we'll have the discipline to stay clear-eyed about our goals, and on whether we'll have the heart to love our people that are so deeply in need of a different path forward. Those aren't our people. I'm sorry, they're not. If they're still for genocide 2 years in, they're not our people. Or you got a serious problem. In the days following October 7th, 2023, thousands of Jews gathered across the country for public recitations of the Mourner's Kaddish for Israelis and Palestinians. We mourn the Israelis who were killed or taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th and the Palestinians murdered by indiscriminate Israeli bombs falling on Gaza. Don't both sides this shit. Stop this nonsense. This is unacceptable bullshit. We refused to let our grief for Israeli lives be used to justify the murder of Palestinians. And we also refused to let go of the humanity of Israelis and Jews. You've got to. Sorry, you've got to. They have let go of their humanity by encouraging, voting for, and continuously supporting genocide and land theft in multiple countries and attacking sovereign nations unprovoked. You cannot just whitewash that and mean, well, that's our community. No, fuck that. In the last 2 years, we've held countless political education events and trainings across the country for Jews who are grappling with their relationships to Israel and Zionism. We've built relationships with members of synagogues and other Jewish institutions who feel disappointed, betrayed, or outraged by their spiritual and communal leaders' abdication of responsibility in the face of an ongoing genocide. As well they should be. They had nowhere to go as synagogue members because their leaders were all pro-genocide. If they were questioning it, where did they go? They just stopped going. We've supported people to take serious personal, professional, and physical risks, to speak out, to demand action from our government, our Jewish institutions, and our elected officials. You supported them, but what if, I don't know how much I even encouraged that. Look, it's brave, and I'll stand by you, but understand that is a risk that they're not taking, apparently. This is the work we must recommit to as we face this critical juncture. We must reach the people who aren't yet with us, people who are confused, who are angry, who are starting to open their eyes to the fact that the story they were told, that their safety was dependent on the oppression of Palestinians, was a lie. People just like my grandpa. Let's come back to that. In the past 2 years, she's hardly talked to her grandpa about Palestine. At 93 years old, as a child of poor Eastern European immigrants who grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust and the creation of the State of Israel, I thought he was a lost cause. I had given up on him. But this past summer, I visited him at his assisted living facility. At one point, he abruptly interrupted me in the middle of an unrelated conversation and said, "Children don't look like that after being hungry for a day or even a week. I remember the photos from the Holocaust. That's what those children look like." Something broke in me then. I had never expected him to see what I was seeing. I never expected that his unconditional love would be able to jump the fence of the lie he'd been fed about our safety. Through my tears, I told him about my friend Auda, murdered in cold blood by a settler in the West Bank that very week. I told him about witnessing a home demolition in Masafer Yada in 2019 and about how easily the house collapsed against the bulldozer's claws like a house of cards. I told him about the Palestinian kids I met and their grandmother that reminded me of my grandmother, how they had never seen the sea. I told him how desperately I fight every day for a world where Jewish safety and Palestinian safety are not pitted against each other. He said, "I'm worried about what this means for the future of Judaism. How do we go on?" That is the question. I asked him what it was about Judaism that he wanted to protect. His response: that Jews should care for other human beings as human beings. I took his hand and committed to him that I would fight every day for a Judaism that embodies this belief. And that's the belief that I was raised with. With tears in his eyes, he said, "The only thing that makes this world good is its people. Unfortunately, it's also the only thing that makes it fucking terrible." But yes, none of us showed up to the movement with perfect politics. We showed up knowing that something was deeply wrong in the world and desperate for something to do about it. Through that process, we all underwent our own transformations. In order to win, we have to believe in people's capacity for transformation. I'm having a hard time with it still, even though your 93-year-old grandfather did. I'm not talking about watering down our message so that we appear more palatable or walking back our commitment to telling the truth about the reality of genocide and of decades of apartheid and occupation. I'm talking about being steadfast, both in our politics and how we practice our politics, or lack thereof, because none of the above, motherfuckers. We have to be committed to meeting people where they're at, and we have to refuse to leave them there. No, we have to bring people to where we're at. You have to meet them where they're at so that you can speak to them, but you have to bring them, like she says, you can't leave them there. But you can't stay with them, and you can't meet them on their terms. Because if you meet them on their terms, then they've co-opted you, not the other way around. This is not going to be easy work. Moving people from an understanding that it's wrong to intentionally starve an entire population to concrete action to end this genocide is not a simple journey, even though it totally should be. This is work that involves building real relationships, asking questions, digging deeper, and the gently but firmly pressing people to entertain the possibility that Jews will only ever achieve true safety if Palestinians are also safe and free. Seems obvious to me. It's going to involve asking people to face their fears and push through to the other side. And stop listening to the fear-mongering douchebags that are profiting from this. It's going to involve holding people in their shame and despair when they realize the full extent of the catastrophe that our community and our country has enabled for not just the past 2 years, but the past 77. It's going to require looking at our own messy politics, the places where we still have more to learn and unlearn as we accompany others on their journeys. It sounds like she's still got a lot more to unlearn, though she's been there. She's actually made the attempt to sit down in Gaza and in the West Bank and learn directly from the people who live it. We have the tools to do this work. Over the last decade, community-based Jewish organizing groups, including her organizing home, if not now, have been running training programs that have been transformational for thousands of people. As a participant and facilitator in these programs, she's seen it happen. She's watched people of all ages have told each other, as they've told each other, stories of their ancestors' fights for survival, of their experience of indoctrination in Jewish institutions, of the movements of rupture in their families and communities. I've cried alongside new friends and comrades as we grieve the way that our people's trauma has been used to justify the oppression, subjugation, and genocide of Palestinians. I've sat with people as they started to see, with fresh eyes, the reality of almost 80 years of apartheid and occupation. And I've asked these people to take action, to do things they've never done before, to sign on to a letter, to speak at a rally, to ask others in their community to join them, to risk arrest, to risk getting fired, and to risk their status in their community. Organizing at its core is about transformation. It is the job of organizers to help people see the world in a new way and realize their own power. And when that personal transformation happens on a collective level, we unleash the power to transform society. This is as much a spiritual project as it is a political one. I think that's a little holdy-handy, hopey-changey kumbaya. But again, remember, she's still pretty liberal. She says we're up against forces who are looking to exploit every opportunity they can find to fracture this movement, and we don't need to give them any more opportunities to do so. We owe it to ourselves and the movement we're building, to the growing movement of Israelis who are taking immense risk to resist their government's tyrannical policies, though there aren't nearly enough of them, to the precious souls who've been murdered by the Israeli apartheid regime. And most importantly, to the Palestinians who continue to resist the daily horrors of the genocide, to do everything we possibly can to help to build the movement that we need to win, whatever winning is. And again, I think defining a win even is something that we would all have to argue over. I feel like this is doing mental gymnastics to justify some stuff, but I specifically wanted to talk about the thing with the grandfather, and because it's very personal to me too. I struggle with it I have a father, I've been pretty open, who's a Zionist. And he and I are still very close, and we go back and forth and back and forth. And I won't stop trying to change his mind and trying to scream at him about how wrong this all is. Because this is the guy who put the values in me to know that this was wrong. So how can he not see it? And I'm not going to stop trying to convince him. And usually what he ends up doing is throwing his hands up and saying, I don't want to discuss this anymore, because he doesn't have an answer. He doesn't have a response. He doesn't have any kind of justification other than to say, I want to, like it's that childish, and then all the Hasbara, the narrative, but he doesn't even bother with the October, he does try to reference October 7th. And I keep reminding him, it's not about October 7th. Okay. It's about so much more than that. And it's about holding these people in humanity. Why do you think they would even want to rebel or have a prison break on October 7th? And let's call it the prison break that it actually is, and not call it the worst terrorist attack in the history of the country, or whatever you want to call it, where they allowed it to happen, where they called in the Hannibal Directive, where Israel murdered its own citizens to do that. All right? And to not even acknowledge it is gross. So I continue to fight daily. And whenever we see each other, we have pleasant conversations, but it will inevitably at some point come down to corruption, control of narrative, and Israel-Palestine, and the way that Israel is trying to own all of the media entities like Paramount and Skydance, buying now TikTok, and now making a bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. Again, that would give them the power to control a narrative across a massive amount of platforms that have tens of millions of viewers. It's something that I'm grappling with, and I'm not going to cut off my family. Although a lot of people have cut off family members that can't see it and that don't even want to discuss it. I refuse to do it, and I will keep trying to make that happen. And I don't want to deprive my kids, their grandparents, for example. And there are those kinds of considerations. So fuck Israel for all of that, and for even having that level of mental gymnastics so that you have to kind of bridge a gap between people who are advocating for genocide, who are in your family, and you who knows that genocide is wrong and is completely against that, but don't want to completely cancel out your family. How do you manage to live alongside that? It's incredibly difficult and frustrating, and in some cases heartbreaking, because the disappointment in people that you thought believed a certain thing that doesn't exist, that is a hard reality to deal with. But I still have more in fuck Israel, by the way. Jonathan Cook, this is a long one, so I'm just going to show you the headline, and I'm going to graze over it quickly because, again, this is very long. This is another one. Trump is turning Gaza into a brutal colonial protection racket. Going back to Eleanor's article about the Gaza peace plan that was signed off on by the UN unanimously with the abstentions of China and Russia. Cook says, and Cook, by the way, is an Indie Media Award honoree from First Class 2022. Trump is turning Gaza into a brutal colonial protection racket. Trump's peace plan will never be meaningfully realized and was never intended to be. It's simply a way of prolonging Gaza's living hell. All right. And he talks about how, the president will be able to dictate the fate of Gaza's people with a simple gesture. Whatever he decides, whether the thumb up turns up or down, it will be called peace, like a Roman emperor. Reminds me of the scene in Gladiator with Joaquin Phoenix with the thumbs up. I think it's thumbs up. Trump's most likely sidekick in this depraved charade will be Tony Blair, the former British Prime Minister. Now, remember, Jonathan is British, so he's coming from a British perspective. Tony won his war crime spurs more than 20 years ago when he joined one of Trump's predecessors, George W. Bush, in launching an illegal invasion of Iraq and a subsequent catastrophic occupation that left that country in ruins too. Satire cannot do justice to this movement. All right. They're talking about how this is a joint U.S.-Israeli occupation, and part of it is in disarming Hamas. Last year, the ICJ ruled that Israel must end its occupation and pull out of all Palestinian territories as rapidly as possible, including Gaza. We can see that they have done the exact opposite and have taken more than 50% of the country, making the territory, making it a yellow zone that any Palestinian that enters will be shot on sight. In supporting UN Resolution 2308, both have, entirely predictably, reneged on that promise. Although at the insistence of Arab states, the resolution makes a vague nod to a possible pathway to statehood, the Board of Peace, that is the U.S. and Israel, gets to decide when or if that actually happens. The worst part is that a precondition is that Mahmoud Abbas's supine Palestinian Authority submits to an undefined reform program. What has that got to do with Gaza? The Palestinian Authority already serves as Israel's reliable security subcontractor in the occupied West Bank, having turned itself into a modern-day Vichy regime. And again, there's a lot more there, talking about the ties to criminal gangs and how Israel has been supporting the criminal gangs in order to loot the aid, and then claim that it is Palestinians that are doing it, not Israeli-supported Palestinians, but Palestinians doing it to themselves so that then they can justify blocking more aid. Okay? Then you again have the behind-the-curtain section, all right, where hand-picked members of the media were given a peek behind the curtain to see who'll be running Gaza. We knew that 18 months ago. We covered the Gaza 2035 plan, that it was going to be a coalition. All right. But now we have actual names. All right. New Civil Military Coordination Center. It's filled with Israeli, U.S., and European military officials, Arab intelligence agents, diplomats, and aid workers. There was, the paper noted, no one representing Palestinian interests, because there never is. The same building was used earlier to house the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Reminder, the U.S. and Israeli-backed mercenary group that pretended to be an aid agency until it was wound up last month when they first announced a ceasefire. But that agency had whistleblowers that were saying that they were murdering Palestinians as well, and working alongside the IDF to murder innocent children that were scrambling for aid. But again, we have a name. The new center is led by Arya Lightstone, who served in Trump's first term under the then U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, an outspoken pro-Israel zealot whose main mission was to get the U.S. embassy moved, in violation of international law, to the Israeli-occupied city of Jerusalem. They did that. Lightstone is likely to emerge as the new Paul Bremer, a hugely unqualified U.S.-appointed governor of Iraq following the illegal 2003 invasion. Bremer, at the time, if you remember, gutted what was left of Iraqi national institutions and civil society after a U.S. shock and awe bombing campaign. Does that sound familiar? The resulting lawlessness made the Iraqi population prey to sectarian death squads, while U.S. firms sought to plunder Iraq's wealth, and did. All right? And there's a lot more here, like I said. Again, nowhere safe, and that's for the Palestinian people to go. All right? The U.S. has decided to only rebuild in the green zone, the section of Gaza under Israeli control. The red zone is to be left in ruins for the time being, because they're not allowing heavy equipment to come in to bulldoze and to set it up, or the Palestinians to go in and rebuild it for themselves. A U.S. official told the paper of the Gaza plan, ideally, you would want to make it all whole, right? But that's aspirational. They're already admitting that they're never going to fix it. It's going to take some time. It's not going to be easy. Ask the residents of New Orleans that were displaced because of Katrina, how their stuff's going. Because there's places that never came back 20 years later. And we're okay, good. We're holding. All right, living hell. The reality, however, is that Trump's peace plan is never going to be meaningfully realized, and it's not intended to be. Gaza was already one of the most densely populated places on Earth. How its starving population of 2 million or so to be crammed in half the space with no homes and all its hospitals and schools either bombed into rubble or out of reach? In truth, this is simply a way of just to justify prolonging a living hell for Gaza's population under the cover of a peace plan, while they desperately try to get another country to be willing to take these people in. But to do that would also be to admit and to concede that Israel is then going to be taking that land and that they're okay with that, which I don't think any country is doing. Israel had exhausted world sympathy to the point where Western leaders' complicity in the genocide had become too visible to conceal. I saw that France actually was like doing something pretty big recently. I'm going to cover that probably next time. Now, rather than having military officials on air spouting self-evident lies about only targeting Hamas fighters, we'll have U.S. officials explaining, with the help of far more savvy public relations teams, how they're struggling under insuperable odds to improve the situation of Palestinians. Anyone refused entry into the green zone will be presented as Hamas or an ally of Hamas. Families in the red zone killed with U.S.-supplied bombs will be terrorists by definition. The new barbarians at the gate. It's all propaganda. The Western media will finally be placated as its genocide-complicit correspondents are ushered into Gaza, but only into the green zone. There, they'll be guided around model safe communities where they can busy themselves airing footage of afflicted Palestinians fleeing Hamas and offered respite in new settler areas, this green zone. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Palestinians will struggle to survive the winter without shelter and significant aid, with no hospitals and no schools for their children, all while being indiscriminately bombed by Israel. This is the only peace, quote unquote, that Trump is offering. And again, fuck Israel, fuck Trump, fuck Tony Blair in the UK, and everyone who's going along with this. Shout out to Jonathan K. Cook. I also wanted to make mention about Miss Rachel. I brought this stand-up comedian. This guy made it a funny about the whole Miss Rachel thing, but also pointed out something that I wanted people to hear. So let's watch this quick.
Miss Rachel is, she's a children's phonetic presenter on YouTube, and she got into some trouble in July because she said, "I don't think we should kill children." That's what she said. And the US media was like, "What the fuck is that supposed to mean? What the fuck are you trying to say?" And so they put her on the news. And I swear to God, you can go back and you watch the interview. The journalist interviewing her says this to her. They say, "Are you in Hamas?" They asked Miss Rachel, who wears overalls and a pink shirt with matching headband every day of her life. They said, "Are you in Hamas?" And I really like to think about that. I like to think about Miss Rachel getting into Hamas. I like to track that. I like to do the forensics on that. She's probably worth $500 million. Lives in New York, has only worked in speech therapy for children, and then now she's a YouTube presenter, brand deals across the globe. How did they DM her? Is that what they did? They DM'd her? She went to hidden messages, she opened that up, she said, "Oh shit, it's Hamas." They said, "We're big fans, we really love what you do. Have you thought about Islamic resistance at all?" And she said, you know what, I have always been interested in Sharia law. I have. The funny thing is what I like about Miss Rachel is she's uncancelable because the kids like her too much. And if you have kids, you know that if there's something that will occupy your children, poor use of words in this joke, but if something will control your daughter's movement for like 3 minutes, it's invaluable. So I mean, honestly, I could turn on Miss Rachel and she could have that green headband on and she could be yelling in Arabic. And I'd be like, let her watch for a little bit, just let her watch for a couple minutes, you know. Put on your scarf, baby, put on your headscarf. You know it's haram not to wear it right now, okay? Mashallah, this is a good show. Alhamdulillah. If you guys don't know who Miss Rachel is, she's a children's phonetic.
Just a little lighthearted comedy about how ridiculous it is that Israel is trying to cancel Miss Rachel. She's Hamas. That's right. We're all Hamas. I also wanted to point out at the end of this that there was a war criminal dinner party protest seen in Union Station last week. And this was beautifully done. So Village Crazy Lady Mel, I saw this from Eitan Fishburger. Check this out. The masks were amazing. So you've got Pence and Blinken, Trump, Netanyahu, and Marco Rubio. And there's blood on the table, and there's baby parts, baby doll parts. What happened? I guess the sound ended. All right, they had a whole menu on the table for their formal fancy dinner party. All right, this is them getting in trouble for setting it all up. So they had to pack it up and move outside. Okay, and while they were going either to or from the station.
Oh, going on a nice walk with my dog.
Well, that was Joe Biden, not Mike Pence, sorry.
Yeah, be a good boy for BB.
Come on. I mean, that's amazing.
And genocide.
Dog biscuits and genocide.
Good boys, good boys. Who's BB's best lab dog?
I don't know. I think they all qualified pretty well. But I would say it's Donnie. Because he's also subservient to Miriam Anderson.
What a funny joke. Good doggy.
So this was them walking to Union Station to the dinner party.
We're together for almost 2 years. Yeah. Good boy. Yeah, you gave me everything I wanted. No pushback whatsoever.
BB's lapdogs. There they are.
The best of the best. I'm the best in serving the master.
And of course, lapdogs need dog tags, which is why they're all wearing dog tags.
Good boys.
Amazing. But that wasn't enough because they also went outside after they got kicked out.
Good boy. Good boy. Loyal lapdog. Thank you. You said yes to everything we asked.
Dude.
Friends in genocide.
It's the Israeli Thanksgiving dinner.
We love Trump and Israel. We love right-wing fascism.
Shout out to whoever had the balls to do this, because they definitely risk getting themselves arrested for doing it. Even though this technically is an expression of free speech, I don't know if they got permits, for example, and...
You guys serve us. America first? What a joke. You guys serve me. Right, Mr. Trump? America first, right?
They needed to make the mouths move on the masks.
Yeah.
It really is art, KYE. I agree. That is performance art.
I know you love to share.
Where can we get those masks? That's a great question.
More blood, yes.
More blood. Oh my god.
It's a genocide. Genocide started in 2023.
How different is that from the state dinner where Mohammed bin Salman was there? Did they toast to genocide too?
New genocide in 2026. Thank you, America, for all your taxes. We love you.
Woo! Fuck Israel. So, just a little funnies and a little bit of, I wouldn't even say poking fun at. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs that this is actually more close to what reality is than anything. But like I said, fuck Israel. So, wow, damn, that was a long fuck Israel segment. I have a ton of stuff still to cover. So I hope you're buckled up, because we're going to be here a while. If you're able to, it means certainly YouTube doesn't like when we post stuff like that. So support independent media and support the media you want to see. The people on that board have already done so. That's our wall of fame. The ways to do that are by Cash App, $, Indie News Network. There's no fees there. Ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Then we got paypal.me/Indie News Network. We're live over at IndieNewsNow.com. That's the name of the show, but it's also a website where you can get news and watch all of INN's shows live. There's also links to merch and support with Stripe there and learn more about the shows on the network. And then there's the Substacks, INN Newsletter, and IndieMediaToday.com, where we're live right now. I know they don't like when I talk about Israel, so we're done talking about Israel, all right? There are so many good independent articles and outlets out there. It disappoints me and makes me crazy that there are so many podcasters, live streamers, and outlets that choose to not amplify amazing work like we just did. You can create, format, and craft an entire show comprised entirely of independent media. We do it multiple times a week here. And I encourage everyone to encourage the show that they go on to amplify more independent media and to stop amplifying corporate media. Please, by all means, stop with the Hill Rising segments and critiquing that crap. Stop with the breaking points and the TYTs and all these, focusing on what they're doing and they're talking about. I didn't have to talk about any of those people, and I covered the news. Keep that in mind when you watch those shows that laugh at what these corporate idiots are doing. It's not funny, and it's not helping anyone. Support independent media, because we need it more than ever. I'll see you soon, fam. I love you all. Have a great night.
Holy shnikes.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want?